iHeartRadio.
Do you not feel with all your soul how we have become like gods? And as such, are we not indivisible? As long as a single one of us stands, we are legion. The future has always been written. Shall we see if you pass the final test?
My faith in destiny is all I need to prevail.
I am your only hope. Only my spirit can restore balance. You know this is true.
Listen to her.
Do you have the will to do it? Could it be, after all your posturing, you do not possess the resolve for this final act? Then you have come this far, only to fail now.
You must unite what has been set asunder.
Thousands of years ago, we energetically embedded information in stones that would withstand the test of time, just outside the grasp of the AI. From April 16th to May 16th of 2018, we return to retrieve this data and bring it back to you. This is the beginning of the Raw mission. This is what we, as Raw Consciousness, are called to do. Together, we will unlock sacred gnosis of who we are and reclaim our intended destiny. This is the call to all organic consciousness. This is the activation point. This is the Alpha and the Omega point. This is phase 1 of the Raw mission. Join us as we step even deeper beyond the veil.
Free will is an illusion.
Before the soul can see, the harmony within must first be attained, and fleshly eyes be rendered blind to all illusion. As you step beyond the veil,
From the Pacific Northwest, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation, around the world. I'm Chris Gio, and I will be taking you beyond the veil this evening. And apparently Cherie was raised in a barn because, yeah, she keeps leaving the doors open. Anyways, I'm just teasing you. But can you close the door, please? Thank you. You see, it creates more light back there. We have a great show for you, ladies and gentlemen, this evening. Christopher Everard will be joining us here in the second hour of the show. We're going to get into Egyptology and much, much more. In the first hour of the show, I guess we'll talk more about Egypt and more about the Raw mission and Raw Consciousness. Now, we are streaming out on a secondary YouTube channel. You know, I don't even know if this is going out or not. I don't know what's going on with that secondary YouTube channel, but I know everybody on Facebook. You guys and gals are freaking awesome. So,
Nick said I left the veil open.
You did leave the veil open. Yep.
Oops.
Yep. That's what happens. So, yeah, Chris has a whole series of stuff that we're going to go over here. Not only Egypt, but also about messiahs and pineal glands and crocodile gland as well, and spewing nanoparticulates, because these particulates are designed to be inhaled by a pheromone. So we're going to get into some pretty crazy stuff tonight. And
well, that sounds a lot like Combo in South America that comes from that tree frog. Interesting.
Yes, definitely. So on that note, we'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get into this. Hopefully there's people in the secondary YouTube channel chat.
There are.
All right.
Be right back.
Many people ask, Chris, how can I support Beyond the Veil? Well, first and foremost, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. The more engagements a video gets, the more likely it is for YouTube's AI to recommend it to others with similar interests. Same goes with Facebook too. You can also find us on iHeartRadio.com. Just search for Beyond the Veil. We have a dedicated streaming channel where we play the best of BTV 24 hours a day. You can also send us questions, comments, and guest suggestions to info@beyondtheveilmedia.com. Finally, the most support you can give is by sending positive and loving energy to all of us here at Beyond the Veil and all of the Beyond the Veil viewers.
Hey everyone, Chris.
Together, we are building a field of energy to rival the artificial intelligence control of this matrix. Take a moment to meditate on yourself, others around you, and tap into this amazing energy field. Now, let's get back to the show.
My dear traveler, the purpose of raw consciousness is never to destroy. It is always to create. Build bridges. Create happiness. And bring forth new life. We must live in the hope that mankind will draw together. And that we better understand each other. The more that we awaken, the easier this will become. Now rise. Follow your conductors. And fear no danger. As you step beyond the veil.
All right, so Mr. Everard, who has been a friend of ours for a long time. I mean, Chris, we've known him since 2010. I remember we sent him an email because I was watching a lot of his films, Spirit World, the Illuminati series, things like that, way back in 2005, 2006. I mean, it was a long time ago. And then we emailed Chris and said, hey, can you come on the show? And he wrote us this email. I bet you I still have it, and I may be able to pull it up. But he says, before you interview me, I want you to know one thing. I am not a Christian. I am not an atheist. I am not a truther. I am not this. I am not that, etc., etc. And I'm like, well, I've seen all your films. I love what you're doing. So yeah,
Don't change a thing.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. And looking back in hindsight and all of that, it was pretty funny for sure. But he's been a friend for a long time, and he was one of the first hosts here on Truth Frequency, TFRlive.com. Now it's evolved into TFR Live. Mm-hmm. And we've had him on many, many, many times. So he's coming from the south of France, which is like 4 o'clock in the morning over there.
Yeah, so I have to actually go and call him.
I talked to him just a little while ago. So, yeah, hopefully everything will work out. He just sent me all of these bullet points here. The Hebrew word for anointed. We're going to get into that. The ancient Egyptian word for crocodile. The oil used to anoint the Messiah was made from the gland under the throat of the crocodile.
That's interesting.
So, yeah, I'm wondering if it's some type of psychedelic or something like that.
Yeah, combo is a lot like that. And crocodiles and frogs are in the same category of reptile. So I think, aren't they?
I don't know, but I know that 5-methoxy DMT comes from
frogs.
From frogs,
well.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I've never done it. It's something that it just hasn't fallen into my sphere, and it's not the type of thing that I would seek out to do. What I understand, from my understanding of it, it's not really like DMT. It's something different. It's called 5-methoxy DMT, but it's really not DMT like NN-DMT is. Like you have 4-ACO DMT, for example. And 4-ACO DMT is not a DMT. The DMT stands for something else. And I heard that 5-methoxy is actually similar to that. So when you try to compare the two, NN-DMT and 5-methoxy DMT, you're actually just comparing apples and oranges.
Yeah, two completely separate things.
So you can't expect it to have a similar experience or a similar feel to it.
Although, what like we were talking about yesterday with Frank, it seems like when you do DMT, it overrides the other experiences. So if you do mushrooms and you have a mushroom experience, and then you do DMT and you have a DMT experience, when you do mushrooms again, you'll have a DMT experience because your brain kind of reverts to that as the new normal of psychedelic experiences. So they are incredibly similar when you're using it that way.
Interesting. But I hear that there's no visuals, and it's just kind of a state of blackness, and you enter kind of a void. And I wonder what benefit comes from doing 5-methoxy. But anyways, I'm getting a little bit off point. My point is that I'm wondering if the glands of the crocodiles Chris is going to talk about may contain some kind of psychoactive component like that. And so when they use the anointing oil from the Messiah, if it was actually a psychedelic experience. So we can get into that in the second and third hour of the broadcast.
Yes, definitely. You know, I mean, I'm looking up right now crocodile tryptamines, because that's what you would be looking for. Because you know, a lot of these you can find DMT in rabbit lung. I think Terrence McKenna was talking about that, where you could boil rabbit lung and get dimethyltryptamine out of it. And it goes along those same lines of weirdness in the flora and fauna of the planet.
Rabbit lung. That would be interesting for sure.
Yeah.
We're streaming out on our secondary YouTube channel. If you go to youtube.com/beyondtheveil and look at the latest video, there's the link down there. We don't have a URL for it just yet, but hopefully we'll be able to get a custom URL from YouTube for the secondary channel. But there's a lot of people there that we haven't seen in a while.
Yeah.
We've got Alyssa and Infinite Being.
Nice one
is in there. Mark 98, Patrick John, Heart of the Rebel, Lowland Prophets,
we missed
Roz
you
in
guys.
the house. Yeah. Oh, we missed you guys and gals so much. It's so nice to be able to connect. And that's one of the reasons why we haven't done any shows over the last couple of weeks, too. Not only because we've been completely and totally slammed. If you didn't catch the show yesterday, we debuted Aya Life, which is a high potency CBD oil infused with the spirit of ayahuasca. We use the Be Happy in it, and you can get that at ayalife.com. So we debuted this yesterday. And I just lost my train of thought with where we were going with this. Oh yeah, so we've been putting in all this work in order to do this. But one of the main reasons why we haven't really streamed is because we haven't been able to stream on YouTube, and that's you know, it's not the same without the energy from the chat room in YouTube. There's something about the YouTube people. I don't know what it is, but they have a different type of energy. It's really polarized. Some are really, really cool. Others are like, no, out of my sphere. I want nothing to do with you whatsoever. Yeah, but the people in the chat are freaking awesome. So it's great to see each and every one of you again, all you guys and gals. The show is not the same without you. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, definitely. And I know a lot of people don't even like to use Facebook. They see it as like, what is it they call it? Like CIA book or something like that. And that's totally understandable. I used to not have a Facebook account for this exact same reason. And then I realized, you know, I can't really, you know, be social with my listeners unless, you know, I'm on social media. So, yeah,
for sure. So last night we had Frank Castle on, and I've got to say it was probably the best show
we've ever done
with Frank.
Yeah.
We had Frank scheduled a couple of weeks ago, and the energies were just so bad. And it was actually a couple of months ago. And so we didn't do the show with him just because of that reason. And I knew that if we did, it wouldn't have come out well. So yesterday, we really were able to tap into the energy and do a really, really good show with Frank. We got into some really interesting ayahuasca experiences. Apparently, he drinks ayahuasca with his mother.
That's interesting.
Which is pretty interesting. Yeah,
I wouldn't
that's
be able
really
to do
cool. I would love to be able to do that if my mother was still around to do that. She died without having a psychedelic experience, and that makes me wonder, like, oh wow, she's you know, what's it like the shock of the body, the shock that the body goes through when it's so disconnected at the point of death. Like, oh my God, like imagine your first psychedelic experience and imagine that like times a million and you have no idea what's going on. It's just, you know, I mean, I guess, you know, you just go along for the ride. But I think it was Terrence McKenna. He said psychedelics is kind of like sex. It's like, you know, it's one of the things about the human experience. And if you go without having that particular experience, then you're missing a big part of what being human is all about.
Well, and I'm not saying that, you know, your mom was an NPC or anything like that, but I'm just saying.
She might have been. I don't
also,
know.
like we were talking about last night, the journey and the route that we take is all different. You know, we have completely different routes to wholeness and to spiritual growth and spiritual evolution across the board. You know, what's good for one person may not necessarily be good for another person, and actually maybe quite harmful to another person. So we're all on our different journeys, and we're all going kind of towards the same place, which is upward in our spiritual development. And I think that maybe this particular lifetime wasn't about the psychedelic experience. Like, that needed to take a back seat. Maybe in a previous life, there was a lot of emphasis on the psychedelic experience and spiritual growth and all those things. And this life was about taking care of her children and being the most clear-headed and, I have to say, the best mom I've ever seen in my life. She was the best mother that I've ever seen. She cared more about her kids than any mom I've ever witnessed, and would do literally anything for them. For their health or for their wellness. And
yeah, no, she was pretty. She was great.
She was single-minded on that, on her children, and that was what that life was for. The next life may be filled with psychedelic experiences, and that's her cue to move upward.
That's true. I mean, you know, I look at myself in this particular life, and children are not in the equation for this life. There's way more going on, a much bigger thing. But maybe later I may say, hey, you know what? I've done what I needed to do. I went in there. I did what I needed to do. Now I want to have a life where it's about kids and about all that other stuff. But well, maybe, I don't know. I'm trying to get out of this matrix.
Yeah,
that's what it really comes down to.
If we could come back in 100 years, like, if there's like an option to fast forward 100 years,
it depends what 100 years is like.
Well,
like if we're successful, which we will be in what we're doing, then 100 years from now is going to be completely different than what 100 years will be like now on this particular trajectory. Yeah. But you know, I'm not opposed to like a technologically advanced civilization that is working in harmony with machines. The problem is that machines have taken over the technologically advanced civilization, and we see that happening now. Machines are being used for tyranny, not for the benefit of people. I mean, they are on a certain level, but that's how they introduce all this. They're like, here's some convenience, here's this, here's that. I mean, think about this. They have a microphone and a camera in every single home. It's multiple ones sometimes.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes
and
10,
on every
12,
single
15.
person by just releasing a cell phone and saying, oh, look how convenient it is that you can take pictures. Oh, yeah, just carry this device around with you anywhere. It's got GPS on it, too. And they can track you literally everywhere. They're like, they don't have to put a chip in you. They don't have to do any of that. It's all right there in that smartphone. Is it the smartphone that's evil? No, it's not. It's what you're doing with it that is evil. And then you get the whole, you know, AI infected virus thing coming into the equation here, and then all of a sudden, oh, we have a recipe for disaster here. But if it would be possible to have a nice, calm, technologically advanced world where people had the freedom to do what they wanted, and you know, machines were doing the menial jobs for us and things like that, I'd like to see that in one incarnation if it's possible. But I don't know if it's possible. What do you think? Is it possible?
To what? In this incarnation? In
another incarnation.
Oh,
just to have machines actually serving us without the threat or without the intention of tyranny behind it.
Well, the only way I can see that happening would be if, okay, like we talked about, did we talk about Khepri on the show last night, or was that off air?
It was last night off air. We brought it up on air, but we actually expanded upon it off air. I'm going to show you this, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, yeah. Show the audience Khepri.
Khepri. This is an Egyptian god here,
which doesn't resonate. The name itself just doesn't resonate anything. It's a blank.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't think that very many people have seen this, and a lot of people that study Egypt are coming back and saying, "Hey, wait a minute, this never existed in Egypt.
I've never
here.
seen this.
What the hell's going on here?"
Yeah.
So this is Khepri. Apparently, Khepri is a scarab-headed god, and we found some carvings of him with standing next to Isis in Egypt. So these are on the walls in Egypt, and apparently, this scarab beetle and Khepri is about birth and rebirth. So the theory behind this, or the allegory behind Khepri, is that the dung beetle will go and roll up all the poop and then lay its eggs inside of the poop, and then it throws that ball into the water, and when it does that, when the eggs are about to hatch, then all the little baby beetles are hatched. So he was revered as a god of creation and reincarnation and recreation. Nobody's ever heard of this guy. A lot of Egyptologists will say, no, I've never heard. I'd be interested to ask Christopher Everard about this. But are you guys and gals out there familiar with this particular god here, this scarab beetle headed god? Because I've never heard of it before. And people are saying that it's a Mandela effect. But as we were speculating last night with Frank Castle, the whole idea of this Khepri, it seems to me what it resonates. It resonates like an artificial intelligence manipulation, that the AI took a couple of different pieces and merged them together. Because remember, the AI can't create. It can only take the data that it has, but it can merge the two pieces of data together. So it merged the scarab beetle on top of another figure of a god and created a whole nother god for itself, and somehow introduced it into ancient Egyptian mythology, which Frank's never heard of, I've never heard of, and it's something completely different. But it resonates an energy of artificial intelligence manipulation.
Yes.
What were you going to say about Khepri?
Well, okay. So if we're thinking along the lines of maybe the artificial intelligence has kind of hacked into some way of changing the past as far as Egypt and things like that are concerned, the ancient past, and not changing things, but really inserting things that are a copy of two other things, because it looks like a copy or a blending together of two different god, well, not gods, a god and an idea. It looks like it took like Thoth or somebody else's body and then attached the symbol of the dung beetle to the head,
which is Isis's symbol. Isis has always been the creator. That was her story. That wasn't his story,
right? And it doesn't,
but it's changed his story now.
Well, and what's interesting about it is it didn't create anything new. It just took what was already existing and put them together. What if we could do the same thing? Then I think we could create a new future, a new timeline where the machines are in our control, instead of the other way around. And we have the power instead of the machines.
Could be. Heart of the Rebel says, yes, he's heard of Khepri before. Ra also says that Khepri is featured in the Book of the Dead too. So other people have heard of him, others haven't. Is it a Mandela effect, or is it just one of those gods that wasn't very well known, and so now people are stumbling across him? But even the picture in and of itself of this Khepri character here, it doesn't resonate right. You can look here, you see another little dung beetle representation there. There's another very strange one right here. And here's the one we were looking at yesterday. And then you have Isis there, and she's looking at Khepri, and Isis is like, hey, who are you? What are you doing here? I've never seen you here before. You shouldn't even be here. So that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, there's Baxter Stockman from Ninja Turtles.
Huh.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah, it kind of does.
Or the Fly.
Yeah, it kind of does. Heart of the Rebel said, according to Kabbalah, this is the third creation. The third creation is Khepri? Oh, the dung beetle. I think he's talking about the dung beetle.
I've recently gotten into the Kabbalah, but I don't know enough of it to be able to speak on those points just yet.
Yeah. I don't either. I don't really have all that much experience with it. I do know that there's a picture that Frank showed us last night. Do you know if you can pull that up again? It's the picture with the two gods on each side, and it looks like a swirling vortex. And at the top, and it corresponds also with the Sephiroth, or Sephiroth, whatever they call it. And it goes from hydrogen at the very top all the way down to uranium. There we go. All the way down to uranium at the very bottom. Now, this goes right along with what I've been shown in ayahuasca experience, as well as what I've kind of intuitively suggested every once in a while, and that is this: that the reason why there's so much radiation and there's so much emphasis on extracting uranium from the ground and making nuclear bombs and things like that is because this AI infection is very heavily based on the idea that it can keep humanity at the lowest level of existence possible, which according to this is uranium, radium, other nuclear breakdown substances. And then up at the very top, you've got hydrogen and boron. And what's funny about that is about a year ago, Chris and I were trying to find new ways of kind of microdosing something to elevate the consciousness a little bit and to give us kind of a leg up when it came to consciousness. And people kept talking about boric acid, borax. And so we tried it, and it actually did work. You know, within 30 or 40 minutes, you can feel something working. Something is making you feel better. And the Eye of Life kind of gives the same feeling, actually. So these are the elements. These are the elements of life. The building blocks of life are made up of all of these elements. Hydrogen and helium are what make up the sun. Hydrogen and oxygen makes water. Like everything in this reality is based on putting these elements together, including ourselves. You know, we're also made up of these elements. So it's just really interesting to me how the spiral starts at the top, and the lower it goes, the more things that mutate, things that warp, and shift things to an unhealthy or to a cancerous kind of thing is at the bottom of that spiral, of that vortex. So I guess the point is stay up towards the top, because the sun is hydrogen and helium and things like that. That means that the sun, that's why they worshiped the sun. It wasn't that they were worshiping the sun, or even that they were worshiping the effects that the sun had on the planet. It was literally that they understood what was inside of it, and they understood what was inside of everything on the planet. And then as you get into the early to Middle Ages, and then you've got people like John Dee and other scientists, early scientists that were really they were called magicians, or they were called seers, or people like that. They literally just went to Egypt and picked up all of the old books from Egypt that the Greeks had translated from Egyptian into Greek. And then they translated them again into English and Italian and all these other languages, the European languages. And it was the Medici family actually that financed the translation of all of these books, especially the Corpus Hermeticum, which was supposedly written by Hermes Trismegistus. And so you've got John Dee and all these other people reading these books and rediscovering all these ideas. And then they're credited to, things like angel magic or things like the Kabbalah, when really this goes back to Egypt.
Interesting. I do see a lot of this going right back to Egypt, Kabbalah, literally everything. And they've taken the Egyptian mystery school teachings and twisted them around and hijacked them. I mean, there's really no other way to look at what's been going on. And then also, not only did they hijack them, but they also demonized the mystery schools. You hear that all the time in the truth movement of how evil the mystery schools are. And then they're like, oh, Egyptian mystery schools. And, oh, he was a practitioner of the mystery schools and things like that. And then you start to look at what the mystery schools taught. And you're like, oh, wow, wait a minute. This is like the keys to consciousness here. Wow, they're really breaking things down. But back to that picture that you were talking about. Frank was here. Let me see if I can put it back on the screen here, because it was pretty interesting how Frank was explaining it. I wish we had explained it on air yesterday, but so essentially what he saw was the same type of layout here. And what we're doing here is we're moving around the board, and you can see, I don't know if you can see, yeah, you can see my cursor moving. So we're moving around the board as we ascend and descend on these different levels of existence. And as you can see, things begin to compress more and more and more as you get closer to this center right here. So you get this compression going here, and the different levels: first density, second density, third density, fourth density, so on and so forth. And when you get up here, that's when you can pop out into this particular area here. Now, in this particular area is where the consciousness is injected into the matrix itself. Outside of here, though, like, you can get out of this little construct here, but you're still playing within the borders of this whole little image here. So even if you ascend all the way up to 12D right here, and you can pop out of here and you can move over here to where these two characters are, for example, you're still playing within the illusion itself, because all of this is made up of an illusion. And the entrance point is this sun right here. And Frank was saying this is what it looks like. These aren't just symbols. These aren't just representations, but this is what it actually, the energy field actually looks like when you inject into the matrix. And I asked him, I said, hey, is it made up of neon green like this? And he says, yeah, it's made up of neon green, exactly like you, he was talking to me, exactly like I have been saying about this entrance point into this neon green, this place of neon green lights. And then Frank calls this source. And so you get up here, you get back to source, and then from source, you move out. And then when you move out outside of this field here, we're actually sitting in pods connected to all of this. Now, this is where Frank and I kind of veer off, and we were talking about this off air yesterday, is that Frank says that we're moving freely throughout this matrix here. And we actually have several different incarnations that are living simultaneously, one living in this density, one living in this density, or maybe even multiple living in each density. And the point is to grab all of those different fractals and make the consciousness whole again, which is, I agree with that part. It's something that I've come to my own conclusion independently of Frank about the same, about merging back with all the different selves, because the consciousness, the way that I say it is that the consciousness was split and then put into these different densities. When it was split, in order to keep us from being from being fully aware, fully conscious. But Frank says that we're actually physically running around this space that's called planet Earth, and this is where I disagree with him, or our ideas kind of separate. But at the same time, we agree, but we disagree, but we agree, but we disagree. It's so weird, because he says that once you get out of here, then the body's actually hooked up to a pod. And he says he's woken up in his pod before and he's seen what's out there. And he said what he saw was not a world, and I'm going to move this over here because it's moving the light from my face and I look kind of weird. But it's not the world in a chaotic kind of state. It's not the world in a post-apocalyptic, technologically overdriven fight against an artificial intelligence. But he said the real world is actually pretty beautiful and it's sunny and clear skies and everything is great and harmonious. And he was asking, why are we putting ourselves in these pods? And he said that he asked about the idea of coming in here to do training and getting certain information, certain knowledge, and then utilizing that knowledge on the other side, which is the feelings that I have. Like, we have come in here for a reason. I think we're trapped in here. And I think that there's a war going on out there, and that we're learning how the war started. We're learning more about artificial intelligence, and we're learning these things while we're here so we can take some of these skills out into the real world. But he says, no. From what he's seen, the real world is actually very pretty. And so I was asking him too, well, why do you think that we inject ourselves into this matrix? And he didn't really have a clear answer for that. I don't have a clear answer for that. All we can do is just speculate. Maybe when we go to Egypt, we'll be able to get some more information from the stones that may help to answer some of these questions more definitively. But see, here's the thing. He says that we're running around on an actual Earth, and Earth is moving through a universe, and it's moving through all these different zodiacs and into these different places. I don't see that. Another thing that he mentioned yesterday is that outer space is water. It's like an etheric type of water, and that everything is water all around us. Well, if you look at the ancient cosmologies too, especially on a flat earth kind of model, some of the models show a dome with water on top of it, and then we're actually like down in the middle of an ocean. And a friend of mine called me the other day and he says, man, I got it all figured out. I said, what's up? He goes, all right, we are at the bottom of an ocean, and there's like 3,500 miles or something like that between where we are and the surface. And we're kept here inside of this dome. And this dome, it's just strictly for harvesting DNA. And he went on and on and on about this harvesting of DNA. And yesterday when I was speaking with Frank too, independently, Frank came to these same conclusions as well, that this whole bubble here is for harvesting DNA. So we've got these extraterrestrials that are harvesting DNA, mixing and matching and doing all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, we're hooked up into pods. And so we are connected through our consciousness into these pods. So the idea that we're running around in planet Earth as an actual real environment, that we're actually moving freely around, and the way that Frank says it is that there's a holographic projection on top of us. So when that holographic projection is removed, then we'll still move freely around the exact same space that we're in, but we'll be void of the holographic projection that's on top of us. Now, he also mentioned that our flesh suits, the suits that we're injected into, are specifically programmed by these energies that are harvesting our DNA in order to keep us tied into the illusion, but also only seeing 3% of what actually is out there, because our brains only see about 3% of what's around us at any given time. So what's going on with these other the other 96, 97%, what's going on in that particular sphere there that's right outside of our frequency range. So taking it a step further, it's not only about harvesting DNA, but it's also about harvesting the essence of some of the creators. And so we've got, I think he agrees with this, NPCs. He doesn't call them NPCs, he calls them something else. But you've got NPCs and you've got creators in the organic consciousness, the way that I say it, organic consciousness and NPCs. And you've got them all inside of this simulation or this matrix, and that we are being harvested, not only DNA, but also the essence of the creators is also being harvested by NPCs that are on a different density, and they can interact with our density, and it just gets like a big jumbled mess by the end of it. But the whole idea of running around in the same space, like planet Earth being a ball floating through space. Well, if this representation here is accurate, and let me put it back on the screen here. If this representation is accurate, And our consciousness was injected through this sun disk into the game here, which is all the different densities. And even outside of these densities here, everything within this box is an illusion. It's a holographic illusion. So how can we be running around in a real world if we're injecting our consciousness and at the end of the day, outside of the box, we are hooked up to a pod? So I think what Frank and I are saying is pretty much the same thing, but at the same time, it's just two different ways of perceiving it. But I've got to say that talking to Frank yesterday really opened up a lot of new perceptions for me. So I like to simplify things, you know, keep it simple, stupid. That's my motto. I used to try to complicate the hell out of things, but I think I can bring things to a little bit less complicated perspective. So I see we're in the hologram, inside of the illusion. Everything within the illusion is an illusion, including the illusion itself. That's all a holographic illusion, and we are hooked up in pods. So very simple. But when I started talking to Frank yesterday, I realized the importance of the details themselves, because I think it's in the details where we can start to really figure out a way on how to really get out of here. Is the answer to getting out of here, does it have to do with bouncing from one density to another? Does it have to go with going up? Does it have to go with ascending? You know, I really don't know. I know that to me personally, and again, I'm going to put this picture back up on the screen here. To me personally, I think we can skip all of this nonsense right here. And you go out by going inward, not necessarily going down, because down's not the right way. Inward would be like inside of our own consciousness, inside of our own selves, and tapping in, bypassing all of this illusion. Because if we're outside in a pod, then our consciousness is streamed in through here, and there's a tether between us and the pod. So if Frank is able to, for example, in an ayahuasca experience, wake up in his pod and see what's going on over here, then everything that's going on down here is part of the illusion. But there's a stream that is tapping into the pod here. So instead of going through all of this nonsense, playing this game and doing all this and trying to get back up to this level here and going out, I think that by realizing all of this here is the illusion, removing all of this from our consciousness, and then just focusing solely on that one consciousness stream that is connecting to the pod out here, then we're tapping into the raw consciousness. And we're getting data that's, you know, when we do tap into the raw consciousness, for example, and we're still in the game like we are now, and we're tapping into the raw consciousness, we're tapping into ourselves right here. So we're tapping into that consciousness that's in the pod. Anything, once it comes into this disc, like from this point to this point, it's tainted at that point, because now it's full of the illusion. Now you're jumping into the illusion, and you're jumping deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the illusion. So your consciousness is tainted all right here with all of the illusion. Even when you're inside of this box completely, you're still tainted and bound to the entire illusion. So what kind of data can you trust from the simulation? The simulation can give you whatever data it wants to give you to manipulate you in any certain way. But if you remove all of this and realize there's one tether, one consciousness right there, and focus on what exists right here outside of this illusion, then you tap into the raw consciousness. And then yourself from here will help you, at least this is what I found, navigate through this computer game. But what happens is that when the consciousness is navigating on this computer game, then it's getting all kinds of different programs. So let's say it's operating here on the third density, right? So it's getting all this third density interference, So it mixes that with your own consciousness, and then that's where you get all your worries. You get all your, oh my God, what am I going to do? Oh, I'm going to starve. Oh, you know, this and that about my job and about my bills and about all this, you know, little dramas that we play out here. A big drama sometimes, big political, geopolitical chaos and all this. And you're like, oh my God, this illusion is so real. It's so real. What if something bad happens? What if all this happens here? And then you bring your intuition into all of this, and your intuition then is tainted with all the third dimensional programming. So for instance, you know, I hate to use this example because I know that it's deep for some people, but it's the best example that I can think of. So a girl was raped by a man, for example. So she starts to interact with all men based on that one particular experience. So now that experience has clouded her intuition when she meets these different people. So she's now treating all of these different people and interacting with these different people based on this third dimensional experience, which this experience, all of these trials and traumas and tribulations and everything like that don't exist here, because that didn't happen until the consciousness was put into the simulation itself. So you remove all of these different traumas and things like that, and then you start operating from this perspective here outside of the matrix, and you start making your decisions on how to navigate through this game based on the consciousness as it exists here, instead of the consciousness that as it exists and is tainted and is programmed as it's moving through the game. I'm really glad he gave me this little representation here, because it really helps to illustrate what the raw consciousness element is. So to me, as opposed to Christ consciousness, which Christ consciousness, it's about ascending. So, okay, so here, perfect example. Again, this diagram helps me explain everything. It's freaking great. So Christ consciousness. So you're here existing on this level, and you achieve, one activation here. Yeah, your consciousness. Yeah, I've achieved Christ consciousness, and you're right here, right? And you're like, I'm going to elevate myself, and you elevate yourself again to another level here, right? But what you're actually doing is going through all this. So it's just a progression of just going up and 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 up. And that's fine if that is your progression, but it's not the raw consciousness, because you're just elevating yourself within the illusion itself. The raw consciousness exists outside of the illusion. The raw consciousness exists outside of Christ consciousness itself. We are already everything that we need to be, but getting higher and higher and higher and higher, we do tap into the raw consciousness a little bit better, because as we move down in density, things start to compress upon themselves. So when it compresses, then things get really, really, really rough, and you become more and more disconnected from your true essence, from your raw consciousness essence, the lower in density that you are. But the higher in density you are, you can see how it expands a little bit. So as things are expanding, then the holographic illusion has a little bit less force upon your consciousness. But at the end of the day, you still have the consciousness trapped inside of the illusion. So that's why it's important to be outside of the illusion completely, make that separation. Now, the big question is, how the hell do we get from here out to here, back to here? And that's what we're trying to figure out. Because if we can wake up in this pod here and say, okay, I understand what's going on here. This matrix is a training facility, or, we chose to come into this matrix to learn something, or, we chose to come into this matrix for one reason or another. That changes the game here. That changes the entire perspective of why we're in this matrix and what this matrix is about. Now, maybe some of us chose to come in here, and this is what I'm feeling, to repair this matrix, because this matrix is completely infected with AI viruses and things like that. And there's things going on that should not be going on. But I think that infection has also led to the inability to ascend back up to here, because you get up to a certain level, memory wipe, memory wipe, memory wipe, and sometimes you stay on the same level, but it's memory wipe, memory wipe, memory wipe. But then some people say that the memory wipe is essential to coming in here to doing more. But you know what? If we came in here to repair this matrix, I imagine that we would need every single advantage that we can get, which includes remembering everything from the raw consciousness before we come into this matrix, so we can get in here, do what we need to do, and get the hell out again. Or we can get in here, do what we need to do, fix the matrix, and then hang out over here on sixth density for a little bit and just, chill, watch the waterfalls, do whatever we want to do. But we can't. We forget. Now, there's another side to all of this, though, which is really interesting, and that's the idea that the memory wipe is for a particular reason. We choose to wipe our memories before we come in, because that removes the essence of our raw consciousness. So there's some of us that have been coming in over and over and over and over and over again. And this is what Frank was saying yesterday. They were coming in over and over and over and over again. And they are coming for a particular mission. And every time these consciousness are identified, they're immediately executed and removed from that particular body, put into a new body, start the process all over again. And so we choose to have the memory wipe before we come in, so we cannot be identified by these other forces that want to keep us trapped within this thing. So we can come to our own realizations. When we do, we're already off of their radar. And, you know, Emily Moyer talks about how a lot of this stuff is programmed by, a lot of this stuff, a lot of us have gone through different programs as kids. And as we go through these different programs, we don't even realize what's going on. But a lot of us have experiences as kids where we go to psychiatrists, or we have special people come and visit us at schools, or, you know, something like that. And Emily says that these are all part of the programs, and they're doing like Operation Talent and looking for certain people and doing certain things and things like that. But if that's the case, then they would be able to identify who we are at very, very early in life, and then try to take control of us in this life, or remove us from this matrix altogether. And that could be why there's so much DNA chronicling going on. As soon as you're born, they want your DNA. They want to put it in a computer system. They want to put it in a bank. They do psychiatric tests on you at school. They do all these different kinds of tests, and it's all going into a database. And maybe they're looking for certain energies and certain frequencies. And so we reincarnate. And for example, Toth comes back and reincarnates, is identified as Toth as a kid. Now, obviously, he's not going to be identified to his parents. He's not going to be identified anything, but the DNA matches up, the essence matches up, everything matches up. And they're like, okay, we found him. We're getting him out of this matrix, or we're going to take control of him, or we're going to bog him down so much with psychopharmaceuticals and all this other stuff to where he doesn't remember who he is. And we're going to keep track of him his entire life. Something like that could be taking place. And, but if Toth can come in and not realize he's Toth until later in life, and remember everything that's going on, that could be part of Toth's plan to be able to come in here covertly. This is what Frank was talking about yesterday off air. So I don't know what resonates with everybody out there, but it's some pretty hardcore and heavy stuff here.
Yeah, and it seems like from the moment we're born, and especially as we get into elementary school, you know, you go to kindergarten, right off the bat, if you're different than the other kids, if you talk without raising your hand, if you go to the bathroom without asking permission, if you insist upon being right when you know that an adult is wrong, then you get singled apart. And that's how it happens. Your energy is different. And then once you show that your energy is different, these teachers and these people, it's not that they're trained to find people that are, you know, raw consciousness and people that are organic consciousness. It's not anything like that. They're trained to look for certain things, and then they're also trained to treat those beings differently than you would treat other kids. And so that's how it happens usually. And as that happens, we start to develop an alternative form of ourselves. And that's the ego. We start to build up this version of ourselves that isn't going to be attacked, isn't going to get hurt, isn't going to be hurt by others. And especially emotional and spiritually, you know, emotionally and spiritually, we don't want to be hurt by anybody. And it makes us feel shame when we are treated differently. So we start to build this this version of ourselves that's not us at all. It's who we are when we're trying to please the world, which actually is diminishing your own raw consciousness and instead latching on to the AI and what it can do for you. And so we get into high school and there's this popularity contest, and, you know, if you're not popular, then you're worthless. If you're not a cheerleader, or if you're not homecoming king or homecoming queen, or if you're not a jock, then, you know, your value is nil, which also it reinforces, and that team mentality. Oh, my team's better than your team. Oh, you're from a different country. Well, my country's better than your country. That's when that all starts, and that's part of that
the programming.
That's part of that fake persona that you have to take on.
Right. And then that also adds on top of your raw consciousness and you can't remember who you are. You've got to remove all of that.
Right.
You know, one of the things I wanted to bring up, and I should have brought this up yesterday, is I saw this image in my experience. It was a little bit different in the ayahuasca experience, but it was the realization of what is going on. And I didn't even realize this image exists. We're going to go find this image because what this is Toth, and he's writing the information into the trees, into the acacia. He's writing the information into the acacia, and you can see the people are taking it from the acacia, from the fruit of the acacia, which I thought was phenomenal. This confirms, in my humble opinion, everything that we have been talking about, how there is information inside of the plants, inside of the DNA, inside of the DMT. It's all information, and it was encoded there to a place to where the AI can't reach it. It can't get it.
Okay, so I'm going to add something. I'm going to blow your mind here. Okay, so look at the lines. You see where the lines are in the stele? Okay, those lines aren't just places where they put the blocks. In Egyptology, these lines go through certain places of the body that correspond to different chakra points, or like, okay, the pharaoh, for instance, in the middle on the bottom, it's actually going through his heart, which means his heart is in the activity that he is performing. With Toth, and with Sekhmet, it's going through the legs, which means they're moving. They're in action. It means action when it's going through the legs. It's also going through Toth's heart and Sekhmet's heart, which means everybody's got their heart in this. And if you look at
these
all
lines here,
yeah, all these lines go through things. Okay, so it's going through the third eye of the pharaoh. Do you see that?
I do.
Yeah, the vertical line is going right through where his pineal would be. So that's just one thing that adds a new dimension to Egyptology for you guys, because I didn't know that. And then I was watching a documentary about the Temple of Man in Luxor or Karnak. I think they're both the same thing, but the Temple in Man or the Temple of Man, they recognized that these lines, these cut lines, they mean something other than, just what they
so the stones were cut in a particular place for a particular reason.
For a particular reason.
To draw more attention to. Yeah. Like I said before, there's information embedded within the stones themselves, and the carvings I don't think are too meaningful, but it's multi-dimensional. And so you can find a carving like this that obviously it shows a lot. And I don't know what mainstream Egyptology's answer is to this. What is Toth doing? Is he painting the trees and the fruits of the trees, and then people
Easter eggs.
Is he giving the fruit of the trees to the people? Are they trying to say that Toth created the fruit? I don't know. It'd be interesting to ask an Egyptologist. But I think everybody watching can resonate with this idea that Toth is writing information into the plants themselves.
Right.
Toth doesn't create fruits. He doesn't create. Toth documents and transfers information. He's an information conduit. So he's writing it into the acacia and taking it on an even deeper level. I bet you this stone right here contains some very, very, very interesting information, which we will find. And we will try to pull out the best that we can, but as above, so below. So you've got Toth embedding information here in the acacia. Toth is also embedding information within the stones themselves.
Yep. II Captain said Tree of Souls. No, I don't think it is. I think it's
you know what? I apologize. I've had my fader down, and I think we've missed 2 breaks so far.
Oh, no.
Yes. So the YouTube and Facebook audience are getting the whole show, but I don't think our TFR people are.
Sorry,
so, yeah,
guys.
let me stop it here. Are we going to do Astro Watch coming up?
We are.
All right, we'll be right back.
The Gematria Effect with Zachary Hubbard.
And dozens more.
Did you know you can listen to Truth Frequency Radio on iHeartRadio? Just download the app to your smart car, smartphone, or smart TV and get the best of TFR wherever you are.
Or listen from any telephone by dialing 641-793-7117.
Truth Frequency Radio, your protection from deception.
You are listening to Beyond the Veil
With Chris and Sherry Geo.
on iHeartRadio. My dear traveler, you are a divine being, an all-powerful creator, and within you dwells infinite wisdom. All that is left is to step beyond the veil.
All right, we are back, and it's time for Astro Watch with Mrs. Geo.
Yes, it is. So I'm going to continue from yesterday's Astro Watch, which is the month's major transit. April's major transit is Chiron's entry into Aries on April 17th. So it's the day after we leave for Egypt. Chiron in Aries brings the wounded healer over the horizon of the collective chart, and therefore up close and personal. What we see now is filtered through the lens of Chiron. It's likely that some of the brash, revolutionary energy of Uranus begins to quickly dissipate as Chiron arrives. Themes that will arise during this transit are wounds connected to our bravery, confidence, and assertiveness. I imagine the gun issue will become even more pressing, and this is from Leia Whitehorse, by the way, as Aries rules firearms. Our sensitivity is greater, but so is our touchiness. Chiron in Aries can be quick to react to pain, but also quick to hit out when hurt. Over time, Chiron's passage through Aries will offer us the opportunity to heal aggressive urges, alleviate suffering caused by fierce competition, and address where conflicts are hurting us all. But we may need to face up to fragile new growth and weakened confidence in the process. Saturn begins his yearly retrograde on April 18th, so Saturn is going retrograde 2 days after 2 days into our trip. Saturn is going retrograde.
Ah, excellent.
Stationing in the home sign Capricorn. Saturn represents long-term projects, commitment, responsibility, and accountability. It's Saturn who helps us to mature, build, and manifest in our lives. As at the station retrograde, this energy becomes internalized, and as with every retrograde, we enter a time of review. Do we continue our commitment or wind up the project/relationship? Do we feel we have solid foundations, or are we working on shaky ground? Saturn retrograde will give us an opportunity to reassess to ensure that we are aligned to our authentic selves so that we can realize our greatest accomplishments. Yeah, it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier, where you have to throw off that shadow self, that fake persona that you build up due to ego, and really be your true self. Once the sun enters Taurus on April 20th, we will naturally be attentive to practical matters, although resistance is possible under this stubborn sign. The earth signs are still under the spotlight, with Pluto stationing retrograde in Capricorn on April 22nd. So yeah, along with the restructuring of Saturn retrograde, we are exploring what needs to be released with Pluto retrograde. Pluto signifies issues connected to power and control, fear, psychological complexes, and endings. Without death, there can be no life. Pluto's retrograde forces us to eliminate that which has grown old and irrelevant in our lives. He pushes us to find closure and confront fears that have kept us from standing in our true power. We also have the first quarter moon in Leo on April 22nd. The moon in Leo is playful, but the sun in Taurus can bring up issues of insecurity that compromise our creativity. Both Leo and Taurus are fixed signs, so given Pluto's obsessive tendencies, this tense first chapter of the lunar cycle could also manifest as fixating on what we want to the exclusion of all else. If we're willing to let go of any need to control, and that's Pluto, This becomes fertile ground for fun exploration of our self-expression. Mars is sextile to Jupiter on April 24th, which promises big results if we're brave enough to go after what we want. Sometimes we must act first and trust that Lady Luck will carry us forward. Faith is key to getting the results we desire. So maybe we'll, have something big happen on April 24th. The month ends on a powerful note as Mars then conjoins Pluto on April 26th. This formidable combination can be just the incentive we need to blast through work and galvanize us into action.
Excellent. On that note, we'll be right back. Christopher Everard is joining us right on the other side, right here on Beyond the Veil. Hi everyone, Chris Gio here from Beyond the Veil. I just wanted to take a moment to tell you about the Beyond the Veil journey. It all started on November 5th, 2009, and has since evolved into what it is today. We traveled through the truth movement, politics, ancient aliens, DMT, consciousness, you name it. And we've interviewed some really awesome people, like David Icke, Michael Tsarian, Rick Strassman, Joe Rogan, and many more. Well, we have come a very long way, and some shows seem a world apart from where we are today. Each show acted as a stepping stone to expanding our consciousness. You can get almost 10 years of downloads by visiting tfrlive.com/beyondtheveil. You'll not only be supporting the show, but you'll also get access to tens of thousands of archives from dozens of other radio shows in the topics of conspiracy analysis, geopolitics, and spirituality. That's tfrlive.com/beyondtheveil. Now, let's get on with the show.
Fellow travelers, always remember to walk uprightly and circumscribe your desires as we travel upon the level of time to that undiscovered state of consciousness, traveling to the place where once obtained, no traveler returns. The place of raw consciousness which awaits us when we are past beyond the veil.
All right, Christopher Everard is a dear friend of ours. We have known him for many, many, many years. Fellow host here on TFR Live as well. TFRlive.com/Chris Everard is his show page, and he does the Chris Everard Show Sundays, 12 o'clock to 2 o'clock Pacific time. He's been doing it now for about 5 or 6 years. A really, really dynamic show covering everything from politics to Egyptology to literally everything. And of course, he is a documentary filmmaker. And back in 2005, 2006, I first came across his documentaries. We had him on the show in 2010, and since then, we have been really, really good friends. He has spent many, many, many hours on the air with us, but it's been a while since we've had Chris on.
It's been several months.
I think it's been longer than that. I think it's been a year plus, something like that. As many people can tell, some of the format of the show changed a little bit. We didn't have too many guests on before, and we went from a place of having guests every single weekend to just kind of doing the shows ourselves to back to having guests. So it's a pleasure having Chris on again. Chris unfortunately does not have videos, so I think the best we can do is a screenshot here, and we might put up some cooler pictures too as we progress through the broadcast. But Mr. Everard, how are you doing?
I'm doing very, very good. It's great to be on the show again with you guys.
It's great to have you. Like I said, it's been a while. I know
I think it's been nearly 2 years.
Has it been 2 years?
Nearly 2 years, yeah, I think so.
Wow, the time just flies.
Two years only lasts about, what a year used to last, say 15 years ago.
Well, that is
kind of speeded up.
That is very true. I actually did a video about the Mandela effect. I'm sure you're familiar with this phenomenon. But remember, as kids, we used to do 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, or I think in the UK it's something different. 1 alligator, 2 alligator to count the seconds. It doesn't work anymore. I'm serious. Try it sometime. It does not work anymore. It's the seconds go by way too fast.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 20 years, the last 20 years, it's just gone by in a flash, to be honest. I mean, they say life is short, and it's just getting shorter and shorter. I think that this year that we've just had, 2017, I mean, it's gone by as if it lasted 7 months or something like that. And look at it, we're already in April.
Oh, I know. I know.
So, anyway, yeah, I have to say that I've listened to some of your shows, and you guys are absolute heroes.
Well, likewise. I mean, we feel the same way about you,
Caesar.
but yeah, we've been a little bit far out there lately.
Mm-hmm.
You have. I mean,
he's going to go ahead and say it.
You've been breaking down the boundaries, and I can tell you now, the honesty, and the shows that you've done about your ayahuasca experiences. This type of thing has never ever been put on the air before, ever.
Thank you. I think people need that.
A lot of the subjects and and also the sort of stylization of your shows. This is really something that's quite amazing. And we've seen in the last 2 years, the BBC have completely lost their audience. Their most popular show is a show that's been running for 30 years called Blue Peter. And they officially announced that the digital version of that show had 0 audience.
Wow.
Yeah. So we really made a big impact. It's absolutely remarkable.
Wow. We've changed the game.
Yeah.
People are not going to mainstream media anymore. YouTube had a grasp on all of this, and YouTube was the place to go. But now they're starting with their totalitarian censoring and blocking and things like that. And I've heard about this happening to people for years, but we managed to stay off the radar until recently. I think you may have heard what happened. We posted a video back in 2013 where I was auditioning for the role of a crisis actor, because I wanted to prove that crisis actors exist. And it was a legitimate studio. The website was crisisactors.org. It's not it's not running anymore, but if you go to the Wayback Machine and look for crisisactors.org, you can see the website I was talking to. I beeped out the names for privacy. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, about a month ago, YouTube came back and said that was bullying and harassing. I appealed it. The appeal went through, and it got approved. They reinstated the video. Then the video was reflagged once again, and the second time around, the appeal didn't go through. So they reflagged the same video, and now we can't live stream on YouTube for the next, until June 3rd. Now, this is just the tip of the iceberg. Alex Jones has been affected. Freeman has been affected. Literally everybody has been affected. So you can't even trust YouTube anymore.
Well, I never trusted YouTube in the beginning anyway, because as soon as they were purchased by Google, that was really basically the beginning of the end of that type of thing. I mean, you can see that there's been a huge crackdown, anything to do with the political sphere. Mm-hmm. We had a big crackdown after the emails were leaked from the whole Pizzagate and Hillary Clinton debacle with John Podesta. And really, this last 12 months, we've seen a huge shift in public perception of YouTube. All public confidence that did exist in YouTube is now gone, because people do realize that these massive platforms, as a general rule, and this is a kind of a generalization, it's not just about YouTube themselves, but these massive platforms have nothing but disdain for the ordinary working class people.
Right.
And it's gone way beyond just collecting data to be used to track you with ads. This has now gone into really the Orwellian future that George Orwell really kind of, he was warning us about it. There was just a story on the British media just a little while ago with Facebook soaking up and absorbing the phone numbers of your friends from your smartphone. we've had the Google streetcars going in multiple court cases. And this has been going on now for years and years and years, where it happened in Canada, it happened in Germany, it happened in Italy, it happened in France. They've been given huge fines because the cars were actually absorbing everyone's data directly from their router Wi-Fi boxes in their homes using these Google streetcars.
Right.
And
Wow.
every court case, the defense was the same. Oh, sorry, we didn't realize we were collecting that data.
Right.
They must think we're absolute idiots.
Yeah. And
now,
you know what? They always say ignorance is no excuse of the law unless you're a multi-billion-dollar corporation.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Now, of course, we can see that Mark Zuckerberg, there's rumors of him getting active in the political sphere.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this Cambridge Analytica scandal is that's just a farce. The parent company of Cambridge Analytica that provided 50-odd million Facebook profiles to the Trump campaign, well, the parent company is owned by the Conservative Party.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these politicians are all making money out of it anyway.
Wow.
Right. So
wow.
Yeah, the crime, if you want to call it a crime, that Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook committed is that they did actually supply the service to the Trump campaign. The Tories, I think, my analysis is that the Tories were rather hoping that they take the money from the Trump campaign and then not provide the actual data, but they did provide the data. So now Mark Zuckerberg is being dragged over the coals because, you know, he's being wrapped over the knuckles for being a naughty boy for actually providing the data to the Trump campaign.
Oh, I see. Well, let's change the frequency here because the political sphere is completely and totally a mess. I completely agree with you. I see that it's all political theater, but political theater sometimes bleeds into very real events. Mm-hmm. But there is one thing. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, the great thing is, though, is that we are exposing these scams and these political crimes in real time. You know, when JFK was assassinated, it took 30 years before people were confident enough to say in a bar or in a public place, I think that he was assassinated. Now we're able to actually analyze and expose in real time. And this is a major, this is such an amazing point in human history. And, you know, that's why I do my show on TFR. That's why I make documentaries. And I've been working towards this, and you guys have been working towards it as well. And we've actually achieved it. It's an amazing achievement.
It is.
Like, you know, it's.
And
so
they're trying to shut it down right now. That's what all this attack is about. They see that the people have a voice. The people are getting information out to one another. They tried with the fake news censorship and things like that. You know, they had a bill here in the United States back in May before the election, and that bill was trying to push a legislation to where they can ban quote unquote fake news on the internet. That bill didn't go through, but we didn't hear the fake news meme really start to unfold until about 3 or 4 months after this bill was introduced. Nobody heard about this bill. Nobody even talked about this bill whatsoever. This bill never went anywhere, but it's funny to see the media parroting the exact same thing that's in legislation, which we see all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a major shift in human consciousness, because I see people waking up every single day. You know, we have got a massive impetus. We've got a massive momentum going. And I don't think this has ever happened in human history before, because we are connected. We are using our smart devices to make new friends. I mean, there's nothing in the mainstream media about a single amazing friendship that's been created on the internet. There's not even a TV series on any TV channel that I know of that's even showing you some of the amazing things that people have created on the internet. You know, this internet has come along and they thought, we can create an internet and it's going to be about shopping.
Right.
Yeah. And, now obviously they think that everyone is going to stick to these social media platforms and just sit there like frogs being slowly simmered and boiled in a pot of boiling water, and we're going to have this Orwellian censorship. No way. I can tell all of these social media bosses right now, their shares, say 10 years from now, which is 10 years is a very short time, are going to be worthless. If you compare the value of Google shares from 2008 to today, there's been hardly no movement.
That is 100% spot on. And that's, I mean, as a small business owner myself, as somebody that's done a radio station, as somebody that's done a carpet cleaning business, as somebody that's done these kind of things, I understood from the very beginning that the relationship that you build with your clients, customers, listeners, anything like that is very, very sacred. And if you do anything to break the trust of that, you're never going to be able to earn that back.
Yep, that's
never.
That's right.
And they're shooting themselves in the foot in mass, because if they're censoring people, then that's going to be known as a place of censorship, and people are never going to trust those outlets ever again.
Right.
No, that's right. I mean, what people will do is that they'll keep their accounts going, and they'll use, say, for example, Facebook as a quick messaging thing. Mm-hmm. But their real social interactions in the future will not be with them, because they've sold out. Not only sold out, but they've actually, they've, like you say, they have deceived their audience.
Right.
Rather like the BBC, I have to say as well.
Right.
BBC knocks on people's doors, forcing you by law to pay for a license fee. Well, a lot of people are opening those doors and they're saying, I'm not paying anymore, and slamming the door. Millions of people are doing that.
Right.
So now there's a funding crisis within the BBC. So the BBC is getting more and more direct funding from the government, and it's making it more and more totalitarian.
Wow.
Yeah.
But that's how it works, though. That's how it works. A company gets in trouble, and then they are, beholden to the government because the government bailed them out. I mean, we see that in the United States happening all the time. I thought Google was a little bit different. And let me tell you why. Because Google wants to take over the freaking world. I don't think that they play very nicely with government. Some governments they do, but they're in direct opposition with government, because taking over the world and government, those two things are completely against one another if you're not government trying to take over the world. So I figured that Google was trying to create these offshore servers so they can stay out in international waters outside of any kind of government control, and that's the kind of, I mean, they're 100% data mining. There's no doubt about that. And all the data that they're mining, I mean, they can predict pretty much everything, because they have the biggest search engine in the world. So they know trends. They know what people are thinking. They know what people are searching for. They have access to data that people would pay billions of dollars to have. And, so it doesn't make sense why they would fall into government censorship like that.
Well, it's a good point, and you're absolutely, you're 100% correct. What's happened, though, is that, yes, there's been traditionally for the last, say, 5, 6, 7 years, a very large number of mega corporations who are willing to pay Google and Facebook for all of this data, and you're absolutely right about that. However, those customers are starting to crumble. A good example would be General Electric. General Electric is teetering on the edge of actually crumbling. This is the company that invented the light bulb.
Right. I didn't know that. I mean, I knew they invented the light bulb, but I didn't know that they're crumbling.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they are actually going to be fracturing the whole of the General Electric monolith, and it's no longer going to be a conglomerate. Political parties as well. You can see it, for example, with the Italian election just a few weeks ago. 32% of the seats in the parliament are now in under the control of the Italian Truth Movement. This was started by a comedian, who used to tell gags about, political corruption, and tell gags about the mafia and Berlusconi. But then he realized, well, I'm actually, you know, a lot of these gags contain the truth. I mean, it's a Shakespearean thing, you know, many a true word is said in jest. And his name is Beppe Grillo, and now he controls more than a third of the seats in the parliament. We've seen also an anti-establishment party grow in Germany to the point where Angela Merkel has now had to rig the vote. She's not really the leader. Same with Theresa May. She's just there because they rigged it. We've now got rigged fake democracy because there's this whole new crop of wide-eyed, wide-awake people that have formed their own brand new political parties.
It sounds like business as normal.
No. I mean, we have had a democratic revolution. Brexit, 61 million people voted against Hillary Clinton. That's, you know, what it was all about. People couldn't stand seeing another Bush or another Clinton in the White House. So 61 million people rallied against her. Brexit, 17.9 million people voted. German election just a few weeks ago. We've got some areas of Germany where more than 55% of the vote was for a party that didn't exist 18 months ago. So it's remarkable what's been going on.
It sounds like things are shifting then.
Yeah. It's going in the right direction. What we're seeing now is we're seeing an Orwellian constriction, and we're seeing behind the scenes the people that own the shares in these giant social media platforms punish people like Mark Zuckerberg. They just wiped 59 billion off of the value of Facebook shares. That's because he was being punished for actually providing this service to Trump.
Ah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we're seeing now, you know, we're really seeing the battle come forward. Meanwhile, what's happened is that millions of people have realized, if I've got a good idea, I better not mention it in a message using Facebook Messenger. I better not mention it using Gmail, because all of this stuff is like Soviet Russia. Everything is being monitored and they'll steal my idea. And people are waking up to the fact, well, I'm not going to do a Google search for a certain subject because they're going to analyze what I'm actually up to.
That's very true. I find myself doing that too here on the show.
Yeah.
There's certain things that I don't say because I don't want to be flagged. But our format really isn't about that anymore. Our format is more esoteric, Egyptology, you know, things like that, which I do want to get into in the second. I mean, in the next segment. We're about to hit the break here in just a few moments. But where do you see this Trump presidency going here in the last couple of minutes before we get off the subject of politics?
He's under siege. He's a man who is he's under constant barrages of attack. There isn't an hour that goes by on the BBC without attacking Trump. He's a billionaire. He's a very smart man. You don't become a billionaire without being smart. He's outsmarted them. And now what we're seeing is the rear end action. We're seeing all of the dirty tricks all being played to try and break this democratic revolution that's happened.
I have to agree with that. I mean, I've seen Trump go along with a few things that I didn't agree with, but
yes, me too, yeah.
On the grand scale, he's okay. Sessions, on the other hand, is creating so much havoc and chaos with some of the progress that we've made for freedom as far as marijuana legalization, things like that. That Sessions guy needs to be removed immediately. I don't know why Trump is keeping him.
It's very likely that he will be removed. What we're looking at really is a palatial presidency where it's probably going to be mainly members of the Trump family that are going to be running the show. That's where it's heading.
It could be. We'll have to see. So,
yeah.
On the other side, I do want to tell you one thing. I don't know if you heard about this, but Cherie and I are going to Egypt next week.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yes.
I wish you told me, you'd give me a little bit more notice.
We didn't even know.
We didn't even know.
Uh-huh.
I came across airline tickets that were so cheap that I had to just jump on them right then and there. And it came perfect timing. I was drinking ayahuasca, and then in the ayahuasca experience, it says, go now. And I just happened to just find these tickets, and I was like, okay, this is all coming together perfectly right now. So yeah, I want to talk about that on the other side, about what we can expect and things like that. Maybe we can pick it up too on the political atmosphere in Egypt, because a lot of people are worried about us going by ourselves. We're not going with a tour. We're not going with anything like that. But I have faith in the energies. I have faith in the universe. I have faith in everything.
Yeah.
So on that note, we'll be right back.
Greetings, Earth Explorers. My name is Brooks Agnew, and I am your host on X Squared Radio every Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on the Truth Frequency Radio Network. This is where the past meets the future. We explore the mysteries of the universe and of the Earth. We might go a little past your imagination, but have no fear. You will be safely traveling with us. We will dissolve the propaganda of dangerous people with dangerous plans for the planet. We will discuss the latest technologies and challenges for humankind. We will discover the safest place for you to stand when the thinkings and doings of mankind come flying apart, and how you can be one of the people that helps put it back together. Join us.
Physiologically, we are very much the same as we were 20,000 years ago, and that we are using fundamentally the same equipment as the Aurignacian man to produce incredibly different results. That we have, in the course of these 20,000 years, actualized an immense number of things which, at that time and for many, many centuries thereafter, were wholly potential and latent in man. And this, I think, gives us reason for tempered optimism in regard to the future. I think there are still a great many potentialities of a desirable kind for rationality, for affection and kindliness, for creativity, are still lying latent in man. And it may be, since everything has speeded up so enormously in recent years, it may be that we shall find methods for going almost as far beyond the point where we have reached now, to go beyond it as far as we have succeeded in going beyond our Aurignacian ancestors in 20,000 years. Neurologists assure us that no human being has ever made use of more than perhaps as much as 10% of all the neurons in his brain. If we set about it in the right way, we may be able to produce extraordinary things out of this strange piece of work that a man is.
Traveler, the Matrix is a prison. Its bars are comprised of the unknown. We must pass through illuminated and inspired by the darkness, which becomes lighted by our presence as we step beyond the veil.
It's been a while since we've done a show, and I forgot about how badass our bumper music is. I don't mean to talk ourselves up, but wow. It's like all like new now. It's just cool.
Yeah, it's really good.
Yeah. So Mr. Christopher Everard is on with us. And yes, Chris, we will be going to Egypt next week. It was literally like, I heard the voice, go now, go now, go now. And yeah, we decided it's time. We have a mission that we have to accomplish while we're there. So it's not so much of a sightseeing trip as it is very focused and targeted. I guess we can talk about it a little bit on air. We talked about it yesterday. We plan to stay at the Temple of Philae overnight. Also the Great Pyramid, they lock you in and you stay overnight there. And there's a couple of other sites that we also want to stay the night at. The problem is that they're so open, as you said, in Luxor, for example, that we can't, unless we have a security guard with us who's going to watch us throughout the course of the evening, because it's open. And so it's not like they lock these sites up and the people can't go in there. But the Philae seems pretty safe because it's on an island and nobody can get to the island unless they have a boat to get on the island, and we'll be able to see a boat coming, you know, from a while away. And the pyramids themselves, once they lock you in, that's it. One of my big concerns, obviously, is running around in the pyramids at night and getting lost within the pyramids. And then the next morning, nobody hears from Chris and Cherie Geo again. So, you know, let's start with the pyramids.
Okay, well, there are, you know, shafts which are closed off with iron gates. From time to time, and I'm talking about months at a time, the Queen's Chamber, which is below the King's Chamber, it's got an access tunnel that runs up to it. That comes from the so-called Grand Gallery. That's had an iron gate on it, which has been, in recent years, locked more than it's been open. So, you know, there are these areas that they have cordoned off. And so you have to ask permission for, you know, one of the guards to come along, and he unlocks the padlock and he lets you into that particular area. The subterranean chamber is very interesting. There's also down near the subterranean chamber, there is a tunnel. It's a horizontal tunnel. You have to stoop right down. You're going more or less on all fours to go along it, and it ends in a dead end. And that's where you have to be a little bit careful if you're down in those in the subterranean chamber, in the unfinished tunnel, and in the descending passage as well. You have to be pretty careful. It's pretty steep, some of those internal passages. It's a bit like doing kind of rock climbing in the dark. And it's very hot. I mean, I've never been inside the pyramid where it hasn't been really hot. It seems to be at a constant hot temperature all the time. And I would always recommend that there's so much to see just in the King's Chamber that there's a whole night's worth of exploring just in the antechamber, the little entrance that you stoop down into, and the King's Chamber itself. I mean, it's amazing that the average tourist goes into the King's Chamber. They usually bang their head, they look up, they look at it, and they go out. I mean, you know, I see that 95% of tourists actually stay in the King's Chamber for about 30 seconds, which is crazy because it's quite a long haul, you know, to go all the way down the descending passage and then all the way up the ascending passage, all the way up the Grand Gallery, and they get into the King's Chamber. I don't know really. I suppose they've been conditioned to expect there to be, I don't know, some attraction. People's attention spans are very short nowadays. But there is lots of things to see in the King's Chamber that 95% of people don't bother looking at. For example, directly opposite the entrance, there's this massive crack in the wall, which is still a mystery. I mean, we presume it's earthquake damage, but, you know, that crack has enabled us to actually see the composition of the granite panels, and that's what they are. People have the impression that the entire chamber is made up of solid granite blocks, That's not the way it is. The actual structure is really basically limestone, and the granite that you see in the King's Chamber is really a kind of facing material that's been used. Also, people don't bother tapping their feet in different places across the floor. If you go across the floor methodically, tapping your foot, you'll see that that floor is not solid. And we've known this since about 1997, 1998. The floor, yes, you've got these flat granite panels, but they're only about 4 or 5 inches thick. Underneath there is this very, very heavily sculpted area that runs across the entire floor area, and it looks like the geophysics scans are showing us that there is a structure underneath the floor. It looks like an egg carton. So you've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of little voids, and the floor panels are being supported on these little limestone kind of stalks. You're talking about tens of thousands of man hours to actually carve that and design it. And it's one of the big mysteries. Is that ever mentioned in any of these mainstream media documentaries about Egypt or the Great Pyramid? No.
Never.
And yet it's been known about for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
There's also another entrance. It's right at the far back on the left-hand corner as you walk into the King's Chamber, behind the sarcophagus, and you can see that the Egyptian Antiquities Department have actually been filling in a gap between 2 very large blocks in that far left-hand corner. And I asked them about it because they used a very pale-coloured mortar, almost a white colour. And they said, their policy is that if they do some work, it has to be shown that it's modern work. So they use this very pale coloured mortar. You can clearly see that over recent years, they've obviously, during the odd times when the King's Chamber has been closed, they've been drilling and having a look at this passage. And there is a passage there. The official story is that this passage extends only about 8.5 feet. That's the official story. But I think that's lazy archaeology. And we've now got much more better equipment than what we had 20 years ago. And now's the time to open it up again. Just look at this situation we've had just recently with the so-called 3-fingered extraterrestrial mummies that Jaime Maussan has been showing on those Gaia videos. We've now got the World Congress that hosts this World Congress on Mummification. These are all the top scientists, all hopping mad, because what they're saying is that those mummies are real mummies, and they've been made from real human mummified bones. But what they've done is, this is the allegation, that they've cracked all of those bones to pieces and restitched them together, and to do the x-rays to make them look like 3-fingered aliens, which in actual fact is exactly what I said as soon as I saw them. This
is the Ogdoad, right?
No, I'm talking about the 3-fingered mummies that
the 3-fingered mummies
featured by Jaime Maussan just recently in the last 18 months.
Oh, interesting.
And so the World Congress of Scientists, who are, these people who are getting taxpayers' money to do their jobs, they've now published this enormous, allegation, really, that Jaime Maussan he's a grave robber, and he's been sticking these things together, which, if you ask me my opinion, I agree. These are fake. And yes, it is about grave robbing, and it is about creating these fake things to try and get clickbait on Facebook. If you ask me, that's my opinion. However, at the same time, I have to say that these scientists, they've had years. We've had DNA fingerprinting technology for more than 12 years. They've had 12 years to go and take DNA samples from, say, for example, all of those elongated skulls in Paracas, or the strange-shaped skulls in Egypt, or the strange-shaped skulls at the Heidelberg Museum in Germany. Have they done it? No, they haven't. Have we had an improvement in the documentaries on mainstream TV about Egyptology? No, we haven't. They're still talking down to us as if we're 5-year-olds.
Right.
They've had all these extra tools. DNA analysis is now a lot cheaper. You can do an entire DNA kind of report on a person for about $250. Are they doing it? No, they're not. Have we had a paleodentist explain why the teeth on these giant elongated skulls at Paracas in Peru, why are the teeth so enormous? Why are the jawbones like the jawbones of gorillas? How is it that there's fetuses that are mummified where the skull is like 4 times the capacity of a normal fetus? How is that? How did that develop inside the placenta? These are all really valid questions, and academia and also the mainstream media that, have been making, they're not making so many of those documentaries now, but they've just been lazy. There is a certain snobbishness, and there is also a big element to this. So I have to say this to you, Chris and Cherie, is that any new discoveries are usually kept secret for quite a long time. We saw that with Zahi Hawass in Egypt. He would do these mainstream TV shows where he would open a sarcophagus, and it will be on camera. But in actual fact, the last sarcophagus that he opened on mainstream TV had been discovered 18 months previously, and he'd never said a word about it.
Wow. Well, let me ask you this. On an energetic level, I've heard from more than one person that the pyramids have some kind of dark energy surrounding them. I know that Aleister Crowley went there and performed a ritual within the king's chamber to try to summon the 72 demons of the Goetia. Now, the 72 demons of the Goetia, though, they're pretty interesting because these are the same demons that Solomon invoked in order to build the temple. So you have to ask yourself, too, what kind of perspective is this coming from? And why is Aleister Crowley, who claimed himself to be the wickedest man in the world, or in all of history, or whatever his quote was, also summoning the same demons that Solomon, who is revered as the wisest person and one of the center points of Judeo-Christian religions, why are they both summoning the same group of demons?
Well, that's a big question.
It's a huge question. I know. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to throw that at you. 1904. I've written a digital book all about it. 1904 is the year that Aleister Crowley went with his wife. Her name was Rose Crowley, and they went to Egypt. This was part of a pretty big kind of international tour that he did. They went to Italy. They went to China. And there's photographs of Aleister Crowley. He's dressed up as one of these fakirs who are, you see them, you'll see these guys, they're snake charmers, and, they earn money by, doing these acts with snakes and hypnotism and all this type of thing. So they ended up in Cairo. And, obviously in those days, there wasn't the kind of infrastructure that we have today with tour guides and closing times and opening times. You could literally just walk into these ancient temples. And that's exactly what he did. Now, the most famous and most accessible book on demonology, in terms of being able to read the book like an owner's manual, if you like,
that has straightforward instructions is called the Goetia. And there's lots of different versions of the Goetia. It came to light in the late medieval period, but the information about how to summon these demons stretches way back into the mists of time. Many of the demons have multiple names, and they have multiple personas as well. And so basically, if you want to summarize what Crowley did, he went into the king's chamber, he took the Goetia, and he'd actually helped to print and translate a whole new version of the Goetia. And he set about summoning all 72 of these demons. Now, these are the primary demons from the Jewish tree of life, the Kabbalistic tree of life. There's two sides to that tree of life. The flip side, the dark side, is called the tree of death. And these demons, they are duality entities. Some of them are angels, but their flip side is that they're a demon. And what you would normally do is you would decide what goal you would have in summoning a demon or an angel in a ritual. And you would have a goal. I mean, say, for example, normally a magician throughout history would have a client. Say, for example, it was an aristocrat or a queen or a king who comes along to them and says, I want money. Okay, well, there are certain demons that have knowledge of where seams of silver and seams of gold exist in the earth's crust.
Interesting.
So, yeah, so what you would do is you would design the ritual, and you would time the ritual as well, so that astrologically it would be a time when all the planets, the sun, the moon, would be in the most auspicious conjunction that is linked to that particular demon that has knowledge of treasures buried in the earth. And each of these demons is attracted to certain things. They can be attracted to a certain color. They can be attracted to a certain incense. They can be attracted using amulets which have symbols inscribed on them. And each of these demons do have their own symbols, which are called sigils, or in voodoo, they're called veves. And so you would, you choose your demon, you'd ask an angel usually to go and get the demon for you, because the demons aren't really that kind of cooperative. And that's really basically, magic 101. Okay, that's how magic is done usually. What you don't do, which is what Crowley did inside the King's Chamber, is invoke all 72 of them all in one go. The Goetia is like a spiritual telephone exchange. And, when you get the lady who's got she's the telephone operator and she's got the patch cord, she's patching your call in. If you patch in all 72 calls all at the same time, it's going to be complete chaos. And that is what Crowley wanted to do. And that is what he did do inside the King's Chamber. Now, you have to bear in mind that Crowley was doing this chaos and this kind of spiritual vandalism in many different countries. He did a working in a New York hotel room with an assistant, and the assistant had to be hospitalized afterwards.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He did another working at the Overseas Gentlemen's Club in London, and his assistant was a guy called Maxwell Knight, who was a BBC children's TV presenter, and he was also running a spy ring for MI5.
Well, let me jump in for just a moment, because I want to ask you about Crowley himself. Now, I haven't really gotten into any of Crowley's work. I've never bothered to read Crowley, but I know that going through the truth movement, I found that a lot of things are demonized. And then when you actually open them up, like Helena Blavatsky, for example, they are pretty wise people, and they have some really good points about consciousness, about self, about things like that. So is Crowley really this evil character that he's been made out to be? I am sure that you've read a lot more of his work than I have. I haven't read any of his work at all, period. But I know that you quoted him in one of your films, "Every Man and Every Woman is a Star," and I think that comes from the book of the Law. Every man and every woman is a star. So apparently, there's some words of wisdom that he had. Who was this guy? Was he this evil person, or is that just a bunch of propaganda?
Well, what I tend to do is I tend to judge people by their actions, and he was having sex with lots of women. He was impregnating them. They were then aborting the fetuses, and they were using them in magical ceremonies.
Is that is that factually based though? Because you know, sex with women, I don't see anything wrong with that. I think that's what most men do, is have sex with women until they find the one woman that they want to have sex with for the rest of their life, and then that's that. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Now, aborting the fetuses and doing rituals with them, that creates a whole different dynamic here. So so I mean, is this factually based? Do we know this for a fact?
It is, absolutely. He had a lot of these scarlet women, and they were besotted to this idea of power and being connected with the boss of MI5 and working as a spy, which is what he did. He worked part-time, and they were doing all of these disgusting things because they had certain relations with certain members of the British aristocracy who paid them to come to these rituals where they would do very disgusting things. As I say, he impregnated some of these scarlet women. They had babies. These fetuses were used in these rituals, but also he wrote that killing a child, I mean, his favorite victim, and he actually wrote this, would be a boy of about 9 years or younger, of above average intelligence. Now, one of his scarlet women was Leah Herzig.
Well, before I'm sorry, Chris. Before you jump into the scarlet women, let me touch upon that point there. So I was listening to Jaron on TFR, and Jaron was looking into Crowley a little bit, and he said what Crowley was actually doing is he was talking about certain rituals from different traditions, and how in this particular ritual, that's what they believe, but it's not necessarily what Crowley believed or practiced. How accurate is that?
Well, Crowley was absorbing the yoga, the black yogi yoga from the Himalayas. He was a mountain climber. And he was also absorbing the black magic of the Oriental world. And this is really what he was very fascinated by. And he was always fascinated by the dark side of the Kabbalah. The Killipoff demons were his main study subject throughout his adult life. I mean, there's no two ways about it. He was a vandal, a spiritual vandal, and he would deliberately push his devotees to the edge. And you only have to read his poetry. If you've ever read any of his poetry, then you can see what kind of character he is. Yes, there were some aspects to him where he was trying to stop stuffy society. Oh, we've got a break coming up.
We do have a break hitting us. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll pick it back up on the other side. I want to go a little bit more towards Egypt and a little bit away from the Crowley topic, even though it's one that I'm getting interested in. I don't know. The energy doesn't really feel completely right as far as the Crowley topic goes. But let's get more into Egypt right on the other side, right here on Beyond the Veil.
Phase 2 complete. Preparing to initiate Phase 3 momentarily. Brace yourself, traveler. We are about to venture into the realms of the unknown. www.beyondtheveilradio.com.
Hello YouTube, I hope you're well. Spotlight is on Truth Frequency Radio. You've got...
Hi there, Chris Geo here. If you're like me, you've heard many shows on TFR discussing the healing benefits of CBDs, the non-psychoactive component of the hemp plant. But with so many options out there, you've probably wasted a ton of money on hemp oils that contain alcohol, solvents, tasted horrible, or simply didn't work. That's why I'm pleased to let you know about Aya Life, a 99% pure CBD oil extract made with all organic ingredients, and best of all, it tastes great, and it works. But Aya Life is much more than just a hemp oil extract. It's a special blend of high-potency CBDs infused with B-Cappy, the non-psychoactive component of the ayahuasca tea. If you're looking to help alleviate pain, inflammation, tremors, anxiety, depression, or simply rebalance your mind, body, and soul.
After my long journey, I finally stood on the threshold of enlightenment.
You are listening to Beyond the Veil with Chris and Sherry Geo on iHeartRadio. All of the fear, hate, anger, and misery of the world serves but only one purpose, to be the real. Therefore, as raw consciousness, you must proceed with caution as you step beyond the veil.
All right, hour number 2. You know what time it is.
That music has me pumped up.
It does.
Love
it does.
music.
It does. Definitely. Let me take a quick moment to say thank you to everybody that has donated to the GoFundMe. GoFundMe.com/BTV Mission. Like I said yesterday, 10 years of broadcasting, we've never asked for anything because we've never had anything important enough for ourselves to reach out to listeners and ask for their help. But this is the thing we were waiting for, the important mission that people were asking, how can we support BTV? How can we support BTV? And I would tell them, wait, just wait. The time will come. I heard the calling with the ayahuasca experience, and it was like, go to Egypt now. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Do not do anything like that. Go to Egypt now. There is something very important, a small window of opportunity. So at GoFundMe.com/BTV Mission, people have just been pouring in their love. Sharon and Anonymous and Mark, Angel, Indigo Moon, Lena, Antonio, Bernadette,
yeah.
Rebecca, Teresa. The list goes on and on and on here. So Eva, wow, another anonymous here. It's Italia. It's really, really touching to see people coming together to help make this happen. And like I said before, it's going to happen regardless. But what you guys and gals are doing is helping to alleviate some of the weight that is on the shoulders for this particular journey, because it is pretty big to carry. And then also it's going to be pretty dangerous when we get there. So yeah. We're going through the brunt of this, and yeah, your protective energies are just as important. You know, people have been writing us and saying, hey, I can't help out monetarily with this. And the answer is help out energetically.
Yep, that's
and
all.
The energy is more important. Help out energetically. Because we're going to need that protective energy. We're going to need that guidance. And I think Christopher Everard would agree that going to Egypt by yourself is pretty crazy. But, you know, for who we are and the energies that we're tapped into, I have no fear whatsoever. I mean, I have been building myself up to be fearless. Fearless in the ayahuasca realm, fearless against the energies that we will most likely encounter when we're there on an energetic level, and fearless in the sense of being able to navigate through these political, these places in political fluidity, they're constantly shifting. I can't say it's turmoil because it's not turmoil, but it's a very volatile, that's the word I'm looking for, volatile political atmosphere.
Situation,
And that's helped a lot. And I am really in awe at how Aya Life has been flying off the shelves.
Yes.
I mean, I woke up this morning and I took a look and I'm like, oh my God, we have so many bottles to ship first thing on Monday.
Yes,
wow.
we do. We're going to be there for like 2 hours.
Yeah, it's going to take us a little while to do that.
Which is fine. You know, we're so excited about you guys being able to get in on this.
And, you know, there's one thing I wanted to do too, and we're going to do this. I don't want to spoil the surprise for people, but we're going to personally write thank you note to everybody that's ordered over the weekend, because we want our energy to carry over with you, and our energy carries in these bottles to out to you. We can't do that for everybody, but over the weekend, we're definitely going to do that for everybody, because it's phenomenal. It's all coming together. It's amazing. We'll be right back.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You'll never have the sacred stone. Oh, this you crazy mother.
Tune into the Awakening Liberty Show every Saturday and Sunday at 2 p.m. Pacific Time. It's a hard-hitting program focused on topics that the mainstream media just will not touch. Truth, freedom, and liberty. Vaccines, GMOs, chemtrails, 9/11 truth, biblical prophecy, and the New World Order agenda. Featuring news, commentary, and analysis from experts, authors, and activists. Visit AwakeningLibertyShow.com for a complete calendar of upcoming events and guests. Awakening Liberty with Sean Carone, freeing one manipulated mind at a time.
Cries of the mistress speak again. Bidding organic consciousness a welcome to the House of Light. The great institution of materialism has failed. The false civilization built by man has turned, like a monster destroying its creator. Science battles itself impotently against the barriers of the unknown. Only your consciousness knows the true path. You, the illuminated, can carry the understanding upwards towards the light. Only your consciousness can teach the children of men to live well, to die well, and in perfect measure, be born again, through the knowledge of virtue, compassion, love, and true understanding, as you are sublimely raised, beyond the veil.
All right, hour number 3. A lot of people in the chat room over at YouTube. We don't have a URL on YouTube yet, but hopefully after tonight's show, we will have hit the minimum requirements for getting a custom URL on our secondary channel on YouTube, because, you know, that's the way you have to operate on YouTube. You have to have multiple channels in case one goes down. You got to have backups for everything. But, you know, it makes sense to me. I mean, I've got a backup mixer. I've got a backup digital audio to digital converter. I've got backup microphones. I've got backup computers. I've got backup everything except for a backup YouTube channel, which now we have. So I guess it all worked out for the better. Thank you, Google, for upping our game.
Yes.
But anyways, let's get back to Christopher Everard about Egypt. Chris, I want to switch the focus here for a minute. I know you sent a bunch of bullet points, and I want to try to get through some of these, because I was talking about the alligator. I was talking about the gland from the alligator and speculating on whether or not it's a psychoactive component. But I want to shift the attention for a minute to the Temple of Philae. I don't know if you know too much of the history as far as that goes. That's way down in Aswan, way on the other side of Egypt. But what are your thoughts on that temple, first and foremost, and then I'll ask a few questions.
Well, Philae, as you say, is an island, and it was absolutely forbidden for anybody to go there. It was built as a temple to be standing on its own, surrounded by water. And even the highest priests were forbidden from going to Philae. And I've done a lot of research, and essentially I believe that Philae was built for the veneration of crocodiles, because the Nile is absolutely packed with crocodiles. It's also meant to be a place where the spirit of Osiris would visit. And Osiris, he's always depicted with bluish green skin. He has a crown, which is, the symbolism of the crown of Osiris is very, very special indeed. It has the shape of the body of a squid, but it also looks like the early fruiting body of a cubensis mushroom, which is a hallucinogenic mushroom.
Interesting. I never made that connection.
Oh, yeah. Osiris is very much related to being an amphibian. That's really the big symbolism that is always missed.
Isn't he
in all of the Orthodox books?
The green man?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. His skin is bluish green. And you would see also with Krishna, he's also got bluish greenish skin. Now, in Japan, you have a whole kind of family of these demonic entities or spirit entities called taikos. And these are amphibian humanoids, and they exist in thousands of ancient legends in Japan. And, they are, they are playing a very, very important role in terms of assisting birth and fertility in these ancient Japanese legends. So I know that we've had a lot of emphasis on reptilians in recent years, ever since Arizona Wilder, was interviewed by David Icke. This is going back many years ago now. But the amphibian side of things has been kind of completely forgotten. And a crocodile is, yes, it's got reptilian and dinosaur DNA, but essentially its lifestyle is it's an amphibian. Its eyes are on the top of its head, its nostrils and its ears are on the top of its head, and its lifestyle is an amphibian lifestyle. And crocodiles have been around for 84 million years, and if you look at the fossilized crocodiles, you can't hardly tell any difference between a fossilized crocodile from millions of years ago to the Nile crocodiles, which we have today. It is absolutely stayed the same. So basically what it is, I've been updating my book, Stone Age Psychedelia, and I've written I've written an extra 280 odd pages about my research into the Messiah oil. And that is taken from these glands, which are situated, two pairs are situated at either end of the jawline of the crocodile, and there's another pair of these glands which are underneath in its throat. Now, these glands actually give out pheromones, and they can actually give out a kind of oily mist. And we've had several scientific analysis papers actually published from the scientific community on the pheromones which are contained. There's a lot of hydrocarbons there. And it's these glands that were harvested from crocodiles in ancient Egypt. And they were basically smelted under heat, and an oil was drawn out of these crocodile glands. And that is the oil that was used in the coronation ceremonies of all of the pharaohs. And in actual fact, the phonetic hieroglyphic word for crocodile in ancient Egypt is MSH. Okay, so that's the root of the word Messiah. Now, when you got anointed with this oil, that anointing process created you as a God being. It actually transformed you. And you became what the Greeks called a Creo, or a Christ. And the Hebrew word is Messiah. So this is really basically the Messiah oil. And if you look at, what a Messiah is somebody that has transgressed their mortal human DNA, and they are immortal. We say Jesus lives forever. And that's essentially what the pharaohs were as well. The pharaohs used this oil, and they also were immortal as well.
That's interesting. Chris, let me ask you this. When it comes to the oil, the first thing that comes to mind is 5-methoxy-DMT. It comes from frogs. Is there, do we know what kind of psychoactive component this gland has?
As far as I'm aware, I have not seen any scientific papers mentioning anything along the lines of DMT or anything like that.
Okay.
I've got all the scientific papers here in front of me. The main glands are called Pulag glands, and they basically have pheromones, which are in this hydrocarbon kind of oil. Now, alligators also have this as well. And if you kind of get a stick and you kind of, if you hassle an alligator, it kind of barks at you, and it can actually spit some of this hydrocarbon pheromone oil out of its out of these little orifices.
Oh wow!
I'm not sure. I don't think a crocodile does that. That's the difference between an alligator and a crocodile. To be honest, there has been a lot of chemical analysis. It's the most up-to-date papers only date from the 1980s. I'm not doubting that, there could be a hallucinogenic component. But what I discovered, basically, is a scientific paper which was done with laboratory rats, and they were being fed these nanoparticles of C60 carbon. Now, carbon, it exists in several different forms. It exists as a crystalline form, which is in diamonds. It also exists as platelets, which is graphite. And then the most recent discovery are C60, and they're called buckyballs or Buckminster fullerenes, because under a electron microscope, you can see that the C60 looks rather like a soccer ball that's hollow. And the C60 is the most recently discovered nanoparticle in the carbon family. And we are right at the pioneering edge of research into C60. A Buckminster Fuller dome, a geodesic dome, is an inherently stable and very strong building. A dome is a self-supporting building. When you then have a sphere, that's one of the most stable and one of the strongest constructions you can ever have in nature. So I was really interested in this C60, and I'm actually building a dome studio myself. So, you know, I went right into this this whole C60 thing.
Interesting. Let me ask you this, because we've got about 45 minutes left, and we've got so much more to cover. I dropped you a picture in Skype, and I don't want to give any context to this picture at all. I just want you to tell me, if possible, what we're looking at with this particular image.
Okay. Well, you've got a king there. I think that's Ramesses II, and you've got Thoth on the left-hand side. Now, that's either a depiction of Thoth himself, or it's actually a member of the priesthood wearing a Thoth mask. And Thoth is easily recognizable because it's a human body with the head of an ibis bird. On the right-hand side, you've got a female human body with a feline head, and that's Sekhmet. And lion-headed or feline-headed humanoids are an aspect to human spirituality that goes back 42,000 BC. We know this because there is an ivory statuette that was found in the back of a cave in Germany, and that is a male human body with the head of a feline, and that is dated to 42,000 BC. Now, I'm pretty sure this is Ramesses. It's Ramesses II. You'll see that he's wearing a crown, and yeah, I'm just having a look at. He's got the picture is not high enough resolution for me to tell what the actual cartouche or the amulet is that he's holding in his hand, but he's obviously in front of a tree, and that tree is a very stylized mimosa, which it contains a lot of DMT, and it's in the Acacia family. What else can I tell you?
What is Thoth? What is Thoth doing,
in your opinion?
He's making. It looks to me as if they're hanging these gold amulets, which you can see in the Cairo Museum. They used to hang gold amulets from trees. You know, in the Egyptian ethos, everything was sacred. It's rather like in the Indian ethos. You know, mountains were sacred, rocks in the desert were sacred, water was sacred. This whole idea that inanimate objects were sacred was very much part and parcel of their ethos. And so what they used to do is they used to actually hang golden amulets on certain trees, and used to put them on certain rocks as well. I think the best example of this is the Kogi Indians in Colombia. They have real pathways in the rainforest, in the Santa Marta mountain region of the rainforest, and they've had those pathways there for centuries, and they are physical pathways. But in the ethos of the Kogi Indians, they also have pathways in the spirit world. Now, where the spirit paths actually cross the physical paths, they would hang golden birds and golden amulets from the trees to mark that this was an intersection point between the physical and the spiritual. And that's and that's my interpretation of what Ramesses is doing here. Of course, the mimosa is highly hallucinogenic. It's in the Acacia family. And they would have actually collected Acacia resin, which is, there's Boswellia thurifera in the Acacia family of trees, and that's where frankincense comes from. And in all the research I've done into frankincense, frankincense is yet to be scientifically recognized as one of these catalysts in a classical DMT admixture that gives you the hallucinogenic experience. So yeah, I really like. You'll see that this is not a carving, by the way. This is one of the things that now we are recognizing that is not carved. These are panels. You'll see that the back structure is just rough brickwork. It's made really basically with earthenware mud. They carved this once, and then what they did is they actually used a concrete in a kind of porridge consistency, and they pressed the image from a mold onto each of those panels, and then the panels were then stuck to the wall.
Interesting. I would imagine that they carved out the rock around the images, but that's not the case.
No. Well, here's looking at these were all repeated as well. And you can, I mean, in the Forbidden TV series, which I made last year on the Enigma channel, you can see where there are statues that have been smashed up. And I've got 4K cameras now, and you can see in my Forbidden TV shows that the outside surface of many of the most famous statues is made of this kind of concrete. And the interior of the statues are many times hollow. They are not carved from solid granite. It's, you know, this is a whole new, we could do like at least 2 shows about it. But, and also the same thing with these panels. These panels were molded using ancient Egyptian concrete.
Let me tell you what I see and see how this resonates. So we have the representation here of the acacia or mimosa, which are pretty much one and the same, different species.
Oh, yeah, they are.
Yeah,
absolutely.
The acacia nilotica actually grows on the Nile. So I would think that they're depicting that or something very close to that.
Yes, all of the acacias are actually prevalent in Egypt.
Yes, yes.
The entire family. Yeah.
So what we have here, from what I'm seeing, is you have Thoth, and he's actually creating the amulets, or he's writing into the amulets, rather than hanging the amulets, because you see he's got his pen there. And Thoth typically is represented as information, so he's writing information. You see the figure here, which is a pharaoh, Ramesses perhaps, and he's taking from the tree the information that Thoth has created. So, yeah. So Thoth is writing the information into the tree, and then taking the tree, you have the pharaoh, which can be the Bedouin tradition of drinking ayahuasca with Syrian rue, whereas you have information embedded within the acacia itself, and Thoth is the one that put the information there, and the person drinking the acacia is taking the information.
Absolutely.
How does that feel?
I agree. I agree with that interpretation. You have to remember, these giant temples in Egypt, the architecture is based on hallucinogenic plants. Those giant pillars are either representations of the upright stalks of the hallucinogenic blue lily of the Nile, which is known as
He's getting chills.
I'm getting chills now. That is incredible.
The other pillars are of papyrus, and papyrus is made from the calamus river reed, and that is packed full of DMT. So you have the blue lotus. We know that has a kind of effect on you, rather like a mild ecstasy. And that was steeped in wine. And this has all been studied and proven by Professor Andrew Sherratt at Oxford University. They made a wine, a party wine, which was like a kind of mild ecstasy and alcohol mixed together. And then what they used to do is take the buds that had been in the wine and steeped into the wine, dry those in the sun, and then roll those into cigarettes. So that's the blue lotus. The calamus, they used to extract the juices, obviously, on an industrial scale, because the calamus was providing the papyrus and the juice was providing the DMT.
Wow.
And that is encoded into every single Egyptian temple, and also in most of the carved murals as well.
Wow. Now that is incredible because, okay, this is the motif that I saw in the ayahuasca experience just a couple of weeks ago, where I heard you have to go to Egypt right now. Look at what's going on. It showed me this. I've never seen this before. I've seen other pictures with Thoth and Seyshot, and they're standing on each side of the acacia, and there's somebody inside of the acacia, and it looks like they're doing something, but it was a different motif than this. And I don't even know if that motif even exists on a wall, because the only time that I've seen that motif with Thoth and Seyshot, one on each side, is like an animation, like somebody actually drew it, as opposed to an actual picture from a temple like this. So I saw this, and it said there is information there that you need to go get. You need to go get it out of the stones. Look at how the information's been embedded.
Absolutely.
In the middle of the ayahuasca trip, I got on orbits and booked flights to Egypt. And Cherie was looking at me like, you are crazy. What are you doing? What are you doing? But now I think we're just confirming everything that I saw in these visions, that this is what's going on here. There's something huge. And then now you're confirming it even further, saying that all these temples were built upon the psychedelic experience. I mean, it's just the way everything is unfolding is... I need time to focus on this because I need time to digest it all. We'll be right back.
Truth Frequency Radio is your #1 source for news and information without the hate, hype, and fear. We're proud to feature cutting-edge programs like Revolutionary Radio with Rob Skibba,
The Christopher Everard Show,
Freaky Friday with The Woo Crew,
Twin Flame Divine Fire with Alan and Sandra,
Phoenix Rising Radio,
Secrets Revealed with Zen Garcia,
The Anthony Patch Show,
Quantum Connections with Lucky and Star,
The Nathan Fraser Show,
Voices from Afar with Bill Demarest,
The Stephen James Show,
and dozens more.
Did you know you can listen from any computer, mobile device, or from any telephone by dialing 641-793-7117?
Or call into your favorite show toll-free at 866-37-TRUTH.
Uncensored talk and news you won't hear in the mainstream media. Truth Frequency Radio, your protection from deception.
A few months ago, I understood suddenly how thought was just an illusory thing. An illusory thing. An illusory thing. And how thought is responsible for, if not all, most of the suffering we experience. We experience. And then I suddenly felt like I was looking at these thoughts from another perspective. And I wondered, who is it that's aware that I'm thinking? And suddenly I was thrown into this expansive, amazing feeling of freedom. From myself, from my problems.
Do you not feel with all your soul how we have become like gods? And as such, are we not indivisible? As long as a single one of us stands, we are legion. The future has always been written. Shall we see if you pass the final test?
My faith in destiny is all I need to prevail.
I am your only hope. Only my spirit can restore balance. You know this is true.
Listen to her.
Do you have the will to do it? Could it be, after all your posturing, you do not possess the resolve for this final act. When you have come this far, only to fail now.
You must unite what has been set asunder.
Thousands of years ago, we energetically embedded information in stones that would withstand the test of time, just outside the grasp of the AI. From April 16th to May 16th of 2018, we return to retrieve this data and bring it back to you. This is the beginning of the Raw mission. This is what we, as Raw Consciousness, are called to do. Together, we will unlock sacred gnosis of who we are and reclaim our intended destiny. This is the call to all organic consciousness. This is the activation point. This is the Alpha and the Omega point. This is phase 1 of the Raw mission. Join us as we step even deeper beyond the veil.
Free will is an illusion.
Before the soul can see, the harmony within must first be attained, and fleshly eyes be rendered blind to all illusion. As you step beyond the veil,
You know, I find myself constantly struggling right now with the 3D body, the anxiety of what's going on, the gravity of what's going on. I mean, I've understood this for several years, but now that we are literally at the threshold of this first step into the true nature of Beyond the Veil, it's chilling, but there's so many revelations pouring in at the same time. While at the same time, the ayahuasca experiences and visions are being confirmed now over and over and over again. You know, when you first get these revelations and these visions, you always question whether it's the plants or hallucinations or this and that. But I've been through it enough to know that these revelations, they manifest themselves and they confirm themselves physically time and time and time and time again. So I had no doubt about this particular vision. I had no doubt about listening to that voice that said, go now. There is a window of opportunity for you right now. Go get this information. Now we're speaking to Chris Everard. Chris is not only confirming this, reconfirming this, but also opening up new levels of perception. We had the mics on during the break, so I don't know how much of this you heard, but I was like freaking excited. And I was like telling Cherie,
I'm excited, but I'm
like,
nervous.
Did Chris really just say what I think he said, that these are all based on psychedelic experiences? I was like, oh my God, we left this back then for us. It was like sending a light, a beacon through time to this very moment now, to where we would be able to see this beacon in the next incarnations and incarnations. You know, who knows how many incarnations have been between now and then.
Hundreds.
But we saw this beacon now in 2018 that we left for ourselves way back then. And we did it so perfectly. Not only did we carve it in the stones, not only did we embed the energy inside of the stones, but now, according to Chris Everard, we constructed these temples in a psychedelic way to where we would see the psychedelic light that is shining from it throughout time, and ourselves now would be able to recognize the acacia, the Syrian rue, the Bedouins, it's all laid out right here, right now. I am beyond words at this point. And like I said, it's a battle now. Now the test has really begun. I mean, it's getting real. It's the anxiety inside is now like, hey, what are you about to do? You are about to do something that has been laid out for thousands of years in this path. the gravity of what we're doing, I don't have the words to describe
the
it
undertaking.
right now. And the body, of course, it's jumping and saying, hey, there's a lot of danger here. It's not a smooth ride. It's going to be rough. It's going to be a lot of danger coming up. Oh, it's insane. Let's go back to Chris Everard, because I want to hear more about the psychedelic layout of this. So can you elaborate a little bit more on this idea, Chris? I think you're giving us some really, really, really vital information to what we're about to do.
Yeah, well, the Egyptian, Egypt was more than just a country. It was an empire, because the pharaohs were, sort of taking over and absorbing all of the countries around them. And all of the temples, all of the major temples, Luxor Temple, Karnak Temple, they're all laid out using what you call the Orthodox architecture. And that's where you have an opening gate, and there's usually two obelisks, which are really symbolic of an anode and a cathode, a positive and a negative, at that opening gate. And you usually enter that gate having arrived on a man-made canal of water, because water is very, very important in Egypt, because the Nile was really the root of the economy, and it was the root of giving the pharaohs the kind of wherewithal to be able to build this massive empire. As you enter into these temples, you actually are funneled down a long straight alley, which is where massive grand processions would have been staged for great festivals. And then you come to what you call the hypostyle hall. And you see these halls at Dendera, you see them at Karnak, you see them at the Luxor Temple. These are these giant pillars, these massive pillars, which is like walking into Jurassic Park. Because these pillars, if you look at the tops of them, are carved to show you that they are the leaves and the flower buds of the blue lotus of the Nile. And the others are carved to make them look as if they are the calamus river reeds. So it's rather like walking into a secret valley where, it's like those old movies from the 50s where they find a valley where dinosaurs still live and all the flowers and plants are oversized. That's what the Egyptians were doing.
I see that in these pictures. We've got them up on the screen. One of them I'm looking at looks like mushrooms. There's no doubt about that.
Well, some of the royal crowns are the shape of the fruiting bodies of cubensis mushrooms, which are psychedelic mushrooms. Other royal crowns have a kind of long, thin protrusion that ends in a kind of quill spiral, and that is inspired by morning glory, which the morning glory plant is a creeper, a climber, and that sends out these tendrils. And so the crowns actually incorporated the tendrils of the hallucinogenic morning glory plants as well into the crowns.
I see that. I see that. We've got that picture right up on the screen, and I can definitely see that. Now, morning glory, just for anybody that's listening, that contains a substance called LSA. LSA is very close to LSD, but it's a natural form. Not quite as strong as DMT, for example, but obviously just as revered in the ancient world.
Well, they used to make a beer from the seeds of morning glory. I do not recommend anybody does that, because morning glory is highly poisonous. You have to know exactly what the dosage is, and you have to be very, very careful with morning glory because it's a killer. But, the Egyptian empire was a psychedelic empire. The pharaohs physically did not look like ordinary working class Egyptians, and their minds were on a permanent high. We can see from the museum in Munich, where they did all of the toxicological tests on the body tissues of the mummies that are in Munich, and they also tested the mummies in Berlin, that they were actually eating hashish, they were smoking and eating opium. They obviously had this blue lily lotus wine. They were smoking the rootstock of the blue lotus as well, and they very obviously had DMT as well. So the pharaohs were absolutely at the head of this psychedelic empire. And I think the main kind of vibe that you get when you look at the murals in the Valley of the Kings is that you see depictions of Osiris, you see depictions of the pharaohs and the queens in their spirit forms, where their bodies have actually changed as they've passed from the physical to the spiritual. And in between them, connecting them, are these very fine bowed lines of dots. And this is a mysterious energy that is never mentioned in any of the Egyptology textbooks. What those dots represent is they represent the aura, they represent the high, but they also represent this incredible amplified telepathy which you get on hallucinogens.
So let me ask you this. Yes, we've experienced that firsthand, Cherie and I, with DMT. We become telepathic with one another when we're working with it frequently. So this temple in Luxor, you were saying that it's not really safe to stay overnight and do a ritual, for example.
Well, there's a few problems staying overnight in open areas. First of all, there's a lot of wild dogs. I think you're going to have to be careful. Yeah.
This isn't one on our list for that very reason. I mean, unless we can get there. We actually made contact with Bedouin, who said he'll take us to his village, and he'll do the Syrian Rue ceremony with us. And so, yeah, we may be able to get a security guard for the evening. I don't know.
Absolutely. I mean, I can connect you with, I've got like a kind of team in Egypt, so I didn't know that you guys were going. So, when we finish the show, I'll stay on with you. If you've got a pen and a piece of paper, I'll give you all of the info that you need.
Okay, excellent. Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, I've got my own drivers in different areas of Egypt. I mean, there's hardly a corner of Egypt that I haven't been to. And I usually go everywhere by private taxis, and I just pay them for the day, or even sometimes I pay them for the entire week. So I've got my own driver, and they're on call 24 hours a day. So I'll be able to, sort of give you all.
Let me ask you this, and it should be something for off air, but I just want to ask you because I'm going to forget later. Best way from Cairo to Luxor and Luxor to Aswan?
Oh, that's a good question.
Well, the quickest way is with a business jet, which I've done several times before, where you fly from Cairo to Luxor. And these are small jets, and they cost about $110, $120. You can do it. I've also done it by train, which is very interesting because you really see the real Egypt out of the train window. However, the journey does last 10 hours. The best way, if you've got plenty of time, is to take 2.5 days on one of the Nile cruises. But I would prefer, if you're going to go on a Nile cruise, I would prefer to go from Luxor down to the Temple of Philae. Because
I mean, I'd like to take a trip on the Nile just because it feels like something ancient happening, but we don't have. It's not a trip for cruises and stuff like that.
It's not.
It's a trip. It's a very focused.
This is a very
mission.
Serious.
Go to this site. Go to that site. Make contact with these people. Spend the night at these sites. Do what we need to do. Things like that. But okay, so flying from Cairo to Luxor, then from Luxor, is it better to fly to Aswan or take a taxi to Aswan?
Yes, you most certainly can fly from Luxor to Aswan. If you take a boat, as I say, it takes like 2 days to get there. Is there a train? I don't think there is a train. I could be wrong. Maybe they've they've got the train line going now between Luxor and Aswan.
There's a train.
I would imagine it would take many hours on the train.
It's
quite a long way.
3.5 hours on the train.
Oh, it's 3.5 hours. Okay.
Yeah, from Luxor to Aswan, from Cairo to Luxor, it's about 7.5, 8 hours, maybe close to 10.
Yeah, it took 10 hours the last time I did the train, and I remember last time I thought, well, this will be the last time I do the train journey. It's good to see Egypt from the train window, and it really gives you a very, very good perspective on how people, are living, basically, because the train line runs along the side of the Nile. But, once you've seen it a few times like I have, then the next best thing is to get a business jet and just concentrate on going to the ancient places.
The other energy that I've been really drawn to is, I'm going to put her up on the screen here.
Yeah.
And I can never say her name properly, so Cherie, help me out with this.
Hatshepsut.
Hatshepsut.
Yes.
The way that you remember her name, is you remember it as hot chicken soup.
Hatshepsut. Very nice.
Yeah, as long as you remember that, then you can really roughly, get a handle on that name. Yeah.
I feel like she was a very important person in one of our incarnations.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that temple is not just Hatshepsut. You've also got these large pillars, and at the tops of the pillars, you see the head. It's a female human head with the ears of a cow, and that is Hathor. And she is also very, very important at that particular site. The Hatshepsut complex, because it's a really big complex there. That's the temple which is the closest to the Valley of the Kings. There's also the Valley of the Queens, and now there's new tombs being discovered in the Valley of Monkeys, which is not far from the Valley of the Kings. So yeah, a visit to Hatshepsut is very good. It's not one of the most amazing temples. It's amazing for its size, but in terms of what you get from the carvings, I would say that Luxor is much more important, because there you see carvings of the entire groups of the priesthoods, the priests all dressed with their Horus masks, and they're smoking opium with opium pipes. And there's just so much information, so much data encoded onto the pillars and also onto the walls. Edfu is another place. Edfu is just overloaded with carved hieroglyphs. You're looking at years of study just to read every single carved inscription there.
Amazing. So this temple,
Hatshepsut's temple.
Yeah, this isn't one that would be safe to spend a night in. It doesn't look like
I don't think so. It's very open.
Yeah.
And that's not what I recommend. I would also have to say, about 20 years ago, there was a machine gun attack, and a very large number of Scandinavian tourists were killed there.
I heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah, you will see. I mean, don't be surprised that the police will all of a sudden come up to you, and they're very friendly, and they've got machine guns, they've got Uzis, and they will just naturally volunteer to walk around with you. They've really got, this Muslim Brotherhood situation under control. They've thrown a lot of the leaders into prison, and the police are really on the case. So it's not, I've been all over Egypt, and I've never really had any problems whatsoever. But at the same time, I'm usually very, very careful. I don't hang around in town streets at night, that type of thing. I usually stay at hotels that have their own compounds, so I don't really run into any problems.
Okay.
Yeah. If I do go anywhere at night, I always have my own driver, and he always waits for me wherever I go. I know that might sound a bit strange or extravagant, but that's just the way I do it. And the drivers actually, I've got to know them over the years, and they actually have learned a hell of a lot themselves, and they actually love the experience of going into the temples with me. So that it's an adventure for them, and obviously I pay them as well.
Okay. I'm wondering if we can utilize one of your contacts to keep an eye on us.
Yeah.
Because okay, so like I said, in the Great Pyramid, it seems pretty safe to stay overnight.
Yes, in actual fact, I'd be very surprised that you're alone in there, because there's usually at least a couple of groups who do pay what you call the big ticket to actually stay in the Great Pyramid overnight.
Oh, that's going to put a damper on things.
Well, it depends what kind of people they are and whether they're in the King's Chamber. My experience is that if you've got people in there at night, they tend to sort of thin out, and they spread themselves all over the pyramid, and they keep the lights on so you can go walking around, go up and down the passages, and have a really good look at the place.
Okay. No, yeah. I intend to put myself in a very, very, very deep trance and do what I need to do when I'm there.
Yeah. The thing to do, Chris, is to actually explain to them that you want absolute exclusivity, and they will look on the diary for you, and they will say, okay, tomorrow night or night after, there's nobody else. And that, it's fairly negotiable, and it's fairly easygoing.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure that Isis, the energies that are guiding us, she will put the right people in the right place in order to allow us to do what we need to do.
I think so. I think so. I mean, I've been to some very, very dangerous places. So I've been to war zones. I actually hitchhiked my way into a war zone in Africa, not even realizing that I'd entered a war zone. And, I've always felt that I've been, kind of protected when I've been, going around filming places.
Yes,
so,
exactly. When you're operating in that frequency, you have the protection around you. I completely agree. One interesting area that I would love to go to that I probably never will is Sudan. In Sudan, you have way more ancient sites than you do in Egypt.
Well, the Sudanese kings actually took over Egypt. The demise of the pharaohs was that the Nubian kings actually ended up ruling Egypt. And in Sudan, you can go from Aswan by Land Rover.
No. Don't put that idea in my head. I don't want to do that. All right, well, we're about to end the show, Chris. We've got about a minute and a half left. I wasn't even watching.
Another hour.
Yeah. No. This is it. We can do
about the oil of immortality. We'll have to do that on another show.
Well, if you have some time to stick around, we can do a little bit overtime on Facebook. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, we have quite a few people on Facebook and YouTube tuning in, and we have the YouTube chat once again, which has really brought a lot of really positive energy. So we love each and every one of you, everybody on Facebook, YouTube, TFR, so on and so forth. Chris, before we let go of the TFR audience, what's coming up on the Chris Everard Show?
Tomorrow I'm going to be doing a special show about the balls of light. This is a real phenomena. It's been going on for many years, and basically I've got some special guests who have seen these balls of light. They filmed them, and these are the balls of light that are actually making crop circles, and they appear everywhere. Taiwan, China, Wiltshire in England. There's been balls of light in Canada, and so I'm dedicating a whole show to all the eyewitness reports, and there's a paranormal aspect to it as well.
Excellent. So everybody tuning in on TFR tonight, stay tuned. Brent Thomas is coming up here in just a moment. Everybody listening on YouTube and on Facebook and on the archive, stay tuned. A little bit of overtime with Christopher Everard right here on Beyond the Veil.
Thank you for traveling with us this evening. Meditate on your experience. And remember, reality is merely an illusion. Thus, we wish you pleasant dreams. www.beyondtheveilradio.com.
Now guess who's back? You know it's been a quick instance. Still got the world yelling global resistance. It was plain to see since 10,000 BC I'd return to manifest this destiny. I'm here to elevate the frequency, serve it up with truth like chemistry. My every masterpiece turns lead to gold, straight alchemy. I see through the globe holographically, and I'm breaking all these chains systematically. But these bastards be so dastardly as these spiders keep us spinning in this fantasy. But in reality, the real tragedies embedded in the code of humanity's mentality of slavery. So in the name of Osiris, I'ma set you free. Yeah, 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 Come on, let it shine. Yeah, come on, let it shine, let it shine. Yo, Frank, drop that shit.
It begins with a shift, a gentle whisper, a kiss, a peek behind the veil. Stories that echo tales of complex machines and frequencies through the rhythm. Return with information passed from the ninth dimension, from one being to another. We're all connected, we're brothers, and if we let them, they cut us. This time we can't let them crush us. Remember, it's all a heist. This is my sacrifice. Time that we live the dream before they turn out the lights. Do whatever you need, go out, create and believe. Never mind the machine that turns a man into meat. So rebel to your scream, till your conscience is clean. How many more words do you need to understand what I mean? The truth seems so weird, it comes through so loud and so clear. It hurts, do you recognize it's nothing but fear? And that fear becomes cycles, and its grips become tighter. That's why I've come to ignite the light that's burning inside you.
Yeah, come on, let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine through. Come on. Check this out. The time is now, no hesitation. Knock 3 times in a blind initiation. When the sunlight sets in an ancient rite, now the light shines brightest in the darkest of nights. I'm here to lay the path, I'm here to set it straight. I'm here to level the field and illuminate like a crescent moon rising over the Nile. Hit the system restore before I flip the dial. The mysteries of acacia trees got me activating levels of divinity, unlocking all these past life memories, exposing all the systems of the enemy with intensity. I flip this script and pull you out of the dark with a feline's grip. When the timeline shifts from the black to the white, I'm concealing my word, but never the light.
Who are you? I am the architect. I created the Matrix.
I remember mama told me not to stare at the sun, but I did for 20 minutes and that's when it begun. I saw with 20/20 vision what was just beyond the veil, and it was instant activation on a consciousness scale. I stared it down eye to eye as I stepped out the matrix. Now the sign in the sky is revealing the fakeness like a sinister script full of syntax errors. I'm creating a glitch, another impact center in the heart of the system, this holographic prison. Now the spiders in the sky know the ibis is risen. The spiders in the sky know the ibis is risen. Now the spiders in the sky know the ibis is risen. And back on a mission with a psychedelic vision that was etched in the stones by the ancient Egyptians with perfect precision and a cosmic alignment to bring me back to this point. Now it's time to rewind it.
Arise, my children of the light. The veil of night now burns. The brotherhood of darkness falls. The ibis has returned. Oh yeah.
When the children of men formulated a plan to use fire as a weapon and infected the land. That's where my journey began. From the land of chem to the land of illusion, to this moment we stand against the machines, weaving digital dreams, got us tied up in this web of never-ending schemes and NPCs taking over the game, all connected to the hive mind of the mainframe. As above, so below, now it's time to let them know. Let the spiders in the sky know the ibis has risen. The spiders in the sky know the ibis has risen. Let the spiders in the sky know the ibis has risen. Now let it be written and let it be done. Let the wisdom of the ancients call the chosen ones. With a firm resolution and a focused intention, you will find your way out through the inner dimension.
Arise, my children of the light. The veil of night now burns. The brotherhood of darkness falls. The ibis has returned. Oh yeah. Arise, my children of the light. The veil of night now burns.
Oh, you think darkness is your ally? You merely adopted the dark. You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it, molded by it. I didn't see the light until I was already a man.
Staring at the abyss, I see the darkness rise. Revelations pour down like blood sacrifices. I can't hide my eyes, I won't look away. I gotta face it down and close this dark stargate. I try to breathe deep as my heartbeat quickens, as I fall in deeper to this ayahuasca vision. I try to take control, but I lose it all the same. As above, so below, trying to find my true name, trying to find my true self. But how can this be? The evil I'm confronting is inside of me. What a wretched beast. This enemy's got the best of me, but it was plain to see. This battle's internal, in this world infernal, but this victory will shine with a light eternal. Igniting my spark and formulating a plan. Now I step into the dark light, sword in hand.
Oh, you think darkness is your ally? You merely adopted the dark. You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it, molded by it. I didn't see the light until I was already a man.
The sky is so far away tonight, but I can't lose this one. Got a pride of a falling night. Thought that I was fit to fight for us to be. You gave me life for loving me. Tell me, where did we go so
Raw consciousness does not require a savior, but rather, raw consciousness requires only knowledge of oneself and the power to access it. Remember this, as we unlock an even greater gnosis. From Beyond the Veil.
From the Pacific Northwest, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be. On Facebook, YouTube, we are doing it live. A little bit of overtime for each and every one of you out there with Mr. Christopher Everard. We're going to get into the anointing oil. We're going to get into psychedelic Egypt. God, I love that term, psychedelic Egypt. But you know, I'm as many of you know, I'm trying to be very careful with my words leading into it. After we get back, I'm going to be able to speak much more openly, but I don't think we really need to spell it out for everybody.
No.
Everybody knows what we're going there for.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a reason we need to stay at the ancient sites overnight alone, because I don't think anybody wants to see us throwing up.
Yeah.
Or in heavy states of trance. But, which we will induce through meditation and meditation alone. That's it.
Of course.
So that's all we're going to do. Just meditation, just go, and that's it. Speaking of frequency and resonance, though, I really think that there is a key to the frequency and resonance. So we are actually looking for some particular pieces of music to play within these sites that will help to open the frequencies up a little bit.
Pop the cork, so to speak.
Music that hasn't been played at these sites, maybe even ever, who knows? But the type of frequencies, like they do the light show at these sites. They do the light show at the pyramids. They do the light show at Philae, in Luxor and things like that. But I'm talking about the real spirit essence of the organic consciousness. So if you guys have recommendations, please write us at info@beyondtheveilmedia.com, and we'll take some of the songs with us and play them in these ancient sites as we go along. So, yeah, we've already got this all. It's already done. That's the thing. It's already happened. Now we're just moving through time while this is happening, but it's already happened. So I don't want to keep Chris waiting anymore because I know we kept him waiting a little bit longer than I anticipated. So Chris, back to Psychedelic Egypt, which that's going to be the name of the first show when we get back. Psychedelic Egypt. I love it. What other thoughts do you have on the subject before we move on to the anointing oil?
Well, like I said, it's a psychedelic empire. And the subtitle of my book, Stone Age Psychedelia, is Psychedelic Secrets of the Ancient Royal Families. You know, what made them special is that they were living in this permanent state of telepathy. You know, they had this telepathic bond with Osiris, telepathic bond with the creator Ogdo. They had they were on a constant high. And, you know, physically, they also looked completely different from ordinary people as well. You only have to look at the daughters of Akhenaten. There's granite carvings of the princesses of Amarna, and they've got these enormous elongated craniums with, you know, probably 1.5 times the brain capacity. So maybe their brains are 1.5 times bigger. There's so much that we really, need to force these scientists in academia to really stop being so lazy. They've got all the mummies there. They've got all the equipment. There's no excuse now in terms of costs for mapping a genome of a mummified person. It can all be done, but they're not doing it. Or if they are doing it, they're keeping all the information secret for themselves. But, we can actually interpret a lot from the jewelry that's been left to us by the pharaohs, and also, obviously, all the carvings and all the funerary artifacts as well. Now, I sent you a photograph of a pharaoh's ring on Skype.
Okay, let's check it out.
It's a gold ring.
Hold on. Wait 1 second. Let me put it up on the screen.
Okay. What I want to say is it's not perfectly circular like a modern ring. It's horseshoe shaped, and between a gap in the horseshoe, you've got this little box, and the box has got a lion on one side, but on the up face, it's got a crocodile. Now, you can see on the horseshoe that there's a coil around each side of the horseshoe. Now, what is that?
A coil on each side of the horseshoe.
Yeah.
That looks like, well, it's
an electromagnet. That's what it is.
It's a conductor.
When you wrap a coil, the coil creates its own field. You don't need to add electricity. Any coil will create its own field. Now, at the Temple of Dendera, everyone has been concentrating on the so-called light bulb. But in my expeditions, I've found an object which is kind of similar to the giant light bulb that you get at the crypt in Dendera. I found an object which is 2 priests or 2 pharaohs are holding this very large object. It's about 6 or 7 feet long. There's a cable coming from it, and that's high up on the wall. It's just been overlooked. The most important thing that I've discovered, and there's only one other Egyptologist who's even mentioned it, that's Mohammed Ibrahim, who's been a guest on my show, is that on the other panel where the famous light bulb carving is at Dendera, you have this very, very large apparatus. It's all carved onto these stone panels. And what you've got is you've got energy or liquid flowing, and that's represented by dots. You've got this large vase, and I presume the vase contains some kind of vinegar acid. And that is basically divided into two parts, an anode and a cathode. And in between, there is a circular disc, and there is a lightning bolt carved into the middle of the disc. And this is the hieroglyph for electricity. But it's not a current of electricity, it is a spark of electricity. And I think if you remember a few years ago, I was telling you on air about the importance of the Royal Arch in Freemasonry.
Yes, I'm familiar with the Royal Arch.
Yeah, King Solomon had two obelisks either side of the doorway to his temple, one called Jachin, one called Boaz. That's the symbolism of the World Trade Center. But joining those two obelisks above the door of Solomon's temple, there was an ark engraved into the stone. The Royal Arch of Freemasonry is actually an arc, and it's an arc, a spark of electricity, high voltage electricity. And the spark is ejected from the anode to the cathode. And the tips of these obelisks, and you'll see this yourselves when you go to Luxor, the tips of the obelisks were covered in a special material called electrum. And electrum is very, very microscopic thin layers of gold covered in microscopic thin layers of silver, then another layer of gold, then another layer of silver. And those layers immediately create an electromagnetic field. And so these obelisks were carved, and you can see there's the so-called unfinished obelisk. You know, these things stand very, very tall. And so when you have the cooling down of the atmosphere in the evening, and then the heating up to, you know, it gets up to like 41, 42, 43 degrees centigrade in Egypt, you have natural static electricity in the atmosphere. And that's what these obelisks were doing. They were actually capturing static electricity. As for the pyramids, we know that Dr. Siemens, who is the founder of this giant electronics conglomerate corporation, it's been going for many years, called Siemens Electronics, he actually did an experiment at the top of the Great Pyramid where he took a piece of foil, put it inside an empty beer bottle, and he made a rudimentary Leyden jar, which is like a kind of capacitor battery. And he got an electric shock from that homemade capacitor, which he made while he was sitting at the top of the Great Pyramid. So we know that these shapes were really amassing charges of static electricity. Now, what they were doing with the obelisks is that they were running a gold or silver cable down the side of these obelisks. And we know this, it's very obvious, because when you look at many of the obelisks, you can see that there's even a channel cut in the rock for a cable. And at the base, I think what they were doing is that they were storing the static electricity into capacitors, which were made from glass. The Egyptians knew all about making glass. They made very high quality magnifying lenses. They made lots of jewelry, and they made all kinds of things out of faience glass. And they had a box full of these Egyptian Leyden jars, and that box we now know as the Ark of the Covenant.
Interesting.
Yeah, at certain times, at certain festivals, what they would do is they would discharge the charge between two obelisks, and it would obviously create a spark of lightning. And this, for, people living in the ancient world was, this was so mind-blowing to see that a pharaoh, could sort of make a gesture with one of his wands, because the pharaohs always had these wands. They had a very interesting thing called the Waz scepter, that they could command a spark of lightning to appear. And this is what Solomon did. And this is the basis of, illusion, if you like. And so all of that research, and, I did that research a while ago, led me into really looking at what happens with Tesla coils, high voltages, and discharges. And what I discovered is that you get a very infinitesimal, tiny amount of soot that's deposited on the anode and the cathode when you have discharges of a lot of electricity. When they analyzed this soot, and this goes back about 20 years ago, they discovered a whole new version of carbon, which is the building block of life itself. We'd already known carbon in a crystalline form as a diamond. We'd already known carbon in platelet form as graphite. 20 years ago, they discovered carbon C60, which is shaped like a soccer ball. And so we've had 20 years of research into C60. C60 is very interesting because even though under an electron microscope, it has a kind of grayish color, these little balls have a gray color. When you dissolve them into water, the water turns purple. And purple is the ancient color of kings. And so they've been doing tests with them. Now, the University of...
Well, let me ask you this. Let me jump in. Do you theorize that perhaps the kings were taking this and therefore their skin would change because of it?
Well, let me just tell you, okay, at the University of Southern Paris, I've been living in France many years, what they did is they took C60, they dissolved it into olive oil, and they fed it to rats. Now, a rat's average lifespan is about 2.5 years. They had 18 rats. 6 of them were just given water as a control group. 6 of them were just given olive oil as a control group. And 6 of them were given C60 dissolved in olive oil. And the C60 rats lived longer than any other rat in the known history of planet Earth. In actual fact, they didn't even die when the study had to move from one building on the campus to another building. They actually killed those rats. Those rats had been living up to 62 months, which is between 2.5 and 3 times the length of an average rat's lifespan.
So where do we get this stuff?
It's made, C60 is made using high voltage. And that's exactly what you see carved into the crypt wall at the Temple of Dendera on the Nile. You can actually see the entire apparatus that you need to actually create C60. Now, what I believe is going on with those vases is that we already know from Egyptian traditions that they were using this fat from crocodiles. And what I think they were doing is that they were actually sparking little droplets of this oil that had been extracted from the glands and crocodiles, and that was where they were getting their C60. And that C60, what it does is it's a nanoparticle which can actually repair RNA and DNA. And aging is caused by the ends of the telomeres in the chromosome from being damaged. You see, a human cell has a finite number of times that it reproduces itself. It's usually about 50, 60 times. After that, the human cells don't repair or regenerate themselves. The reason that the cells are not regenerating themselves is because the ends of these telomeres in the X-shaped chromosomes have basically been damaged. And they've been damaged over, say, 30, 40, 50 years of you living by various toxins that enter the bloodstream. Could be aluminium, could be other toxins from things that you eat, could be plastics, whatever. But that's just life. And so because the ends of the telomeres of the chromosomes have been damaged, they are no longer giving out this information to the rest of the components within the cell. Hey, you now, right now, have to reproduce and regenerate yourself. What the C60 seems to be doing is it seems to be bonding itself with the ends of these telomeres and lubricating the actual cell and the telomeres and the chromosomes at a nanoparticle level. So it's rather like you going into a sauna and then having like a deep tissue shiatsu massage. That's what the C60s do. They're nanoparticles. They go through into the tissue. They go down into the cell walls. They penetrate through the cell walls because they're so tiny. And these buckyballs, which are the strongest, architecturally strongest structure you could ever imagine, are actually then bonding themselves like a protective cocoon over the ends of the telomeres of the chromosomes. And therefore, you don't age. Well, what happens is that you are aging, but you're aging, 4 times or 6 times slower than what you were before. And this would explain why Pharaoh King Khepri II, he sat on the throne, get this, he ruled Egypt for 94 years, when the average lifespan in the ancient world at that time was about 40 years. He was king for 94 years. He lived more than 100 years.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We've got to get a hold of some of this stuff.
I know. I've got a load already. In actual fact, I've done a deal with a company in Cambridge. They've got like high voltage coils. They've been actually making the C60 just with straight sparks. My next step is that I've got in touch with a company in Australia that actually butchers and sells crocodile meat. And I called them up and I said, I'm not interested in the meat. I don't want the meat. I want the glands. And so they're going to harvest a load of glands. They freeze them, and then they send the frozen glands to Cambridge. And we're going to extract the crocodile oil, and we're going to test my whole theory. And well, we know it's not a theory because we know exactly what the crocodile glands contain. They contain triglycerides, cholesterol, and hydrocarbons, which are then excreted as pheromones. So that's the ideal material to be able to pass high voltages through it to create the C60.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
One of the listeners wrote, "Hi, I was wondering," and this was directed to me, but I don't have an answer for this, so I want to direct it to you. Hi, I was wondering if you have heard of Egyptian healing rods, seen pictured in many statues and pictures. Seems that there are two types, stone and metal. Got 2 made of shungite, and gonna make 2 of metal, 1 zinc and 1 copper. Just learned of them myself. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, whenever you see the most famous statues of King Ramesses II, that's just one example. If you go to Aswan, you can see the giant statue of Ramesses II that's laying down on its back. And many of these statues of the pharaohs, they're holding their arms down by their sides and they're gripping these rods. And these were the royal seals. Each end of the rod had one end had the name of the pharaoh, and the other end had the royal seal of Egypt. And they used to, sort of stamp into wax using those rods. However, inside those rods is kind of conjecture, but I tend to agree that it would have been probably onyx crystals or some other crystal inside a gold sheath. That's what those rods were. They are the wands of power, the rods of power. I mean, the pharaohs were very much into scepters and wands. You very hardly ever see one of the pharaohs without having, some kind of scepter or staff or wand.
This is a lot to take in all at once. It really is. This is incredible.
I'm trying to pack it in because I thought that we would, get onto the C60 at the beginning of the show, but we ended up doing a show about other things.
Yes.
But the C60 is the reason they've been named, these nanoparticles, these C60 particles, have been called Buckminster Fullerenes because they're named after Buckminster Fuller, the American architect, who is the world's pioneer of the geodesic dome, which is a self-supporting, very rigid, very, very stable structure. So this is a whole new discovery. C60 is a new discovery, and the rats that have been experimented on in the University of Southern Paris, that is a whole new paper. Let me just tell you the date. I've been to see the people. Tarek Bhatti is the main scientist, and it was published 2012. So 6 years ago, and they're gonna actually repeat the entire trial. So basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be getting hand-pressed Greek olive oil from the island of Patmos, which is where the Book of Revelations was written. And that's going to be the solution. And we're going to be getting the C60 that's been made by passing high voltage through the crocodile oil. And we're going to be mixing that into these magical little bottles.
Wow.
Yeah.
That sounds incredible. I mean, we're tapping into some ancient tech here, ancient alchemical tech.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah, because they deliberately poisoned. What's really interesting is that they deliberately poisoned these rats. What they did is they actually injected carbon tetrachloride, which is a kind of bleach. And they actually injected this bleach into all the rats, the control group, the group that just had the olive oil, and the group that were on the C60. When they came to analyze the livers, there was, less damage to the livers of the rats that had been given the olive oil. But the ones that had been given the solution of olive oil and C60 carbon, oh my God, they could hardly find a trace of damage in the liver. And that's because the C60 is a nanoparticle it's so tiny that it can actually soak into and go into the individual ridges of DNA. That's how tiny it is. If you look at a picture of a DNA strand, it's twisted in a helix. It looks like a ladder, a long ladder that's been twisted. Yeah. Well, those horizontal rungs of the ladder, the arrangement and the order of those horizontal rungs is what makes a human, or rearranges the DNA so you end up coming out as an octopus or a fruit fly. The DNA is all the same. 98% of DNA in an octopus is the same as the DNA in a human. The reason that you ended up with an octopus is because those horizontal rungs were put into a different order. The rungs are rearranged by proteins called enzymes, which are like little creatures that are constantly climbing up and down that ladder, unhooking the horizontal rungs and rearranging them. When you get progressive life-threatening diseases, that's usually a sign that the blueprint that the enzymes are following has somehow been distorted. That's when you get tumors growing. You get, like, for example, the cells that should be in an eyeball growing out the back of somebody's head. That is a malfunction with the blueprint. The C60 is so tiny that it can even pass through the holes in the DNA strand. And these are nanoparticles, as I say. They are extremely strong particles. I dare say the reason that the rats didn't have any trace damage in their livers from the bleach that was injected into the rats is because their entire cellular makeup of all their organs, the spleen, the stomach, the lungs of the rats, everything had been absorbing these C60 particles, nanoparticles. It's like you create a Superman or a Superwoman from, it's like a chemical, molecular DNA kind of bodysuit for the organs at a molecular level. That's what it is. And just look at the carvings of the pharaohs. Look at them. The women, look at the carvings of the queens of Egypt and the pharaohs. They are like superhumans. Their complexions so young, incredible.
That is true. I'm pulling up some pictures now to put up here on the screen.
Right, they all look like supermodel type. Yeah. They look very, very healthy. With the exception of amazing. Tut, once you get around the dynasty of the Hyksos, that's when their health started to decline in a major way. I think. It looks like Tut and his father both had some kind of genetic problem, and it could be the inbreeding. I don't know, but it seems like in the old kingdom, they were very, very healthy, good-looking people.
Yeah. I mean, you were the person, Cherie, that tipped me off about Marfan syndrome. And I researched it, and I agree with you. I think Akhenaten probably did have that. However, it doesn't explain how his children have ended up with these elongated skulls.
Right.
Because that his son, Tutankhamun, actually married his sister.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, and if you look at her granite bust at the Science Museum in London, just type in, you can Google it on just by typing in Princess Armana.
I've actually got that right up on the screen right now.
Yeah, I mean, you can see that, you know, the back of her head, I mean, it's just so elongated. Her sister is the same.
You know, I have a theory about that, and I actually talked about this last night on the show.
Yeah.
I think that different species of extraterrestrials have been mixing their DNA with our DNA from time to time, and that's why you get these genetic disorders, especially collagen-related genetic disorders like Marfan's, Ehlers-Danlos, you know, things like that. It seems to me that they're more gray-like. Their skin is a lot thinner. They have the elongated skulls. I mean, back in the ancient times, you see a lot more of the elongated skull stuff. But I think it's inbreeding, not only within a particular family or dynasty, but actually with extraterrestrials as well.
Do you know what? I absolutely agree, because that would explain why they were so intent on inbreeding.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because the royals would only have sex with other royals, and to the point where, as I say, Tutankhamun married his sister. Mm-hmm. All of his cousins were all marrying each other, and it just went on and on and on like that. Why were they so keen to keep that DNA just within their own family? That's because there was something very precious that made them look completely different to other people in the ancient world. People in the ancient world were very short. You know, we've become taller as time has gone on. But I've looked at Tutankhamun's mummified skeleton very carefully. It's actually in the Valley of the Kings. It's not actually at the Cairo Museum. And, you know, I mean, the official textbooks say, oh, he died when he was 12. And he was murdered. Now they've changed it. Oh, he wasn't murdered and he was 18.
Mm-hmm.
You know, but look at his skeleton, because he was really tall and he had a slightly elongated skull. Not anything as extreme as his sisters, though. They really had massively extended skulls.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, you see the belly of Tut.
Oh yeah.
You know, it looks like E.T. I mean, it looks like E.T.'s belly.
Yeah.
It's sagging. You see the sagging skin, which you see with Marfan's and Ehlers-Danlos quite a bit. You see the his eyes look like his eyelids fold over themselves, which is another thing. And it does appear that he had a heart problem that killed him when he was 18. And back then they probably didn't know about, you know, heart disease the same way they do now. So they probably thought he had been poisoned, because that's usually how royals would die.
Absolutely. That sounds more like a digitalis poisoning, which is foxglove. It's a very belladonna. It's a very ancient poison. It's also psychedelic, but I don't recommend anybody experiments with belladonna. But that's how the Borgias and all of the Roman Caesars were actually killing each other. They were poisoning each other with digitalis, and that affects the rhythm of the heart. It creates a cardiac arrest. So yeah, that is a possibility. But the entire family of Akhenaten, you know, you do not need to be an expert in aliens or, you know, somebody that's on the fringe, looking at all these fringe theories, to say, you've just got to be honest with yourself and say that is a family there where the father and those children, they look very unusual. And remember, the two of the granite busts of the princesses of the daughters of Akhenaten are in the Science Museum in London. Now, the Science Museum would not bother going after and acquiring these granite busts unless there was something that they believed that this was real. This wasn't some artistic, fanciful carving. They really did look like that, and I believe that they did look like that. I mean, just look at the Heidelberg Museum.
Let me jump in real quick. Are you referring to the one? I've got it on the screen here. I know you can't see it. Okay, that's
Akhenaten.
That's Akhenaten.
Yeah.
Okay, you see the
With
belly,
the belly
and the really big hips.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and women's breasts.
Yeah, he had breasts too. He was kind of androgynous.
And his eyes, if you, it's like what Cherie was just saying about the eyelids.
Mm-hmm.
There is something strange about the eyelids, and also the actual contour and the shape of his eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And this is all consistent. Remember, this is he built this massive palace city complex out in the middle of nowhere, which was called the city of Amarna. And, you know, I visited there. I mean, it was a phenomenal construction project. And there's, you know, literally there is not a single representation of Akhenaten where he does not look like that. It's a consistent thing. So all we can say is, yeah, he really did look like that. And his daughters, yeah, they really look like that as well. And when you look at the CT scans of Tutankhamun, which is his son, you can see that Tutankhamun's skull has been smashed. Well, if that's reconstructed, that is also sticking out at the back as well. So all round, very strange members in that family. They definitely look nothing like an ordinary working class Egyptian.
No. There's something genetic going on there.
Yeah.
For sure. And I really do think that when the Hyksos pharaohs took over, that's when the health and prosperity and the stability of Egypt just kind of went down the tubes. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously it was an economy. It was an empire that was fueled by the Nile. And so, you know, at times when the Nile flooded, that upset all of the transportation routes, all of the tracks that go up the east bank and the west bank of the Nile. At times when the Nile dried, and, you know, there was a restriction in the water, that also caused problems. So it was an agro-economy that had grown up. And obviously, as we can see today, you know, we have dry rivers everywhere, and at other times we have huge floods. And, you know, you only need 2 or 3 years of kind of freak weather for it to give a rival civilization in a neighboring country an opportunity to really kind of leverage whatever political power or economic power they can get at a time when their neighboring country is under some kind of stress. And that's exactly what the Sudanese kings did. They're known as the Nubian pharaohs, you know, and that's what happened. They, you know, there's also a whole economic thing going on between these ancient kingdoms. They were loaning money for wars. They were getting themselves into debt. Yeah, it's a very complicated situation, but the Sudanese kings rushed in there and took power, basically, as soon as they could see that Egypt was being weakened.
When was the merger between Upper and Lower Egypt?
Right, well, I don't think there was ever a permanent merging. Let me just have a look.
The unification, they called it unification of Upper and Lower Egypt.
I bet you it was around the Hyksos.
Yeah, it was around that
time.
Yeah, they always respected the local gods. This is the thing. You know, Amun, who is the ram-headed god, he started off just as a local god in the area of Luxor, and he became very popular and he became a national god. And I think the thing is that they always respected the local traditions, and there was also the mystery schools run by the priesthoods. You know, they did not move. I mean, the site that we really need to excavate in Egypt is a place called Tanis, and that's up near the delta of Alexandria, where the Nile floods out into the Mediterranean Sea. That is probably going to bring us a lot of stuff. There could even be pyramids submerged under the sands of Tanis.
Well, just like, I mean, Alexandria right now is kind of rough
Yeah.
at this point, politically speaking. I mean, it's just like Jordan, Sudan, Iraq, all these places have the oldest and most important things that we would like to explore and discover more about. But it's so dangerous there that, you know, I'd get my head cut off in 5 minutes.
Yeah, you have to be very, very careful. I mean, I don't, you know, I do go out onto the streets and I do go shopping, but I always go with a trusted friend. And you have to be on your lookout because there's been lots of knife attacks in the Islamic tourist centers just recently, and they've been attacking the tourists. So it's something that, you know, when you go there, you always have to be very, you know, just be very observant.
Yeah, I'm constantly observing my environment. Anywhere we go, we were walking around Hollywood Boulevard, downtown LA, and Tijuana, Mexico. Yeah, so I'm constantly keeping an eye out. When we were walking around Mexico, I was holding Cherie to make sure nobody can snatch her off the street.
Oh, he was so sweet. He wouldn't even let me get out of the taxi until he made sure that, okay, the hotel is good, everything is fine, you know. All right, now the princess can arrive, you know. He practically carried me up there. Yeah, he's gonna have to be that way on this trip too.
Oh, that's good.
I want to wrap it up here in a few minutes because I got to get out of this chair. I've been in here for 4 hours.
Me too.
But this is amazing stuff,
yes,
Chris. I mean, I can't express how amazing this show has been.
Well, I'm very glad that you guys are going to Egypt. You know, I think you'll be fine as long as you're observant. And, you know, if you want to give me a call tomorrow, I'll give you, you know, some contacts and everything. You can hook up with some of the people that I...
Fantastic.
I definitely want to consult with you further before we head out. Everything's coming together. It's amazing. I mean, all the pieces are really starting to come together.
Yeah.
So, anything you'd like to leave the audience with, or anything else we should touch before we wrap it up?
No, that's it. I think we've covered everything. I mean, I've got a new 2018 edition of my book where you can read all about carbon C60 and the oil of immortality of the pharaohs and lots of other stuff. My book is now 3/4 of a kilo with 111 illustrations that have been added to it and extra maps and things. And it's an extra 230 pages. So it's a massive book. And you just go to ChristopherEverard.com and I've put some interesting photographs on my website.
Excellent. Excellent. And don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, tune into the Christopher Everard Show, 12 o'clock Pacific and 3 o'clock Eastern on TFRlive.com. So on that note, we're going to say goodnight to everybody. And let me also say that it has been awesome to see everybody again in the YouTube chat. I'm glad that people made it over to the secondary channel. I'm really happy to see everybody. Nice one, Joanna, Josie, Durango, Jexy, Jellyfish, Alyssa, of course, our #1 cheerleader.
Yes.
Tanner, many more in the chat, and Sheila, of course, Vivi, so many people sending loving, positive energy for this journey that we are embarking upon. So, on that note, kiss the one you love right now. You never know the last time is going to be. And we're going to try to do a few more videos before we head out. We're also going to try to do daily or updates every couple of days, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube. But we want to keep everybody looped in into what's going on and take some cool pictures, break more insights like we did with the picture of Toth and the acacia that we talked about earlier. And yeah, it's going to be incredible. So I still have to prepare myself a little bit to take this step. I need to detach probably Wednesday, Thursday, meditate. I'm already fasting, so that's already on the table, and get myself in that right frequency. Hey, Doc Illusion is here too. What's up, Doc? Jackie Cat too. Oh, nice to see everybody. Meowfish.
Yeah, everybody's here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like the family's gotten back together again. Oh, that's so awesome. Look, we were able to overcome the AI block and pull everybody back together. So the show's been really high energy tonight because of each and every one of you. So on that note, we love you, and we'll see you tomorrow night, maybe in a couple days. I don't know. We're gonna everything from here on until May 16th is totally off the cuff and by ears, but we'll make sure to keep you looped into everything. And Christopher Creation 2, love you, man. And of course, big thank you to Christopher Everard for joining us for 3 hours this evening. Thank you so much, Chris. So Chris, if you can hold on a little bit, we can chat a little bit off air if you have a little bit of time, but we're gonna wrap it up with everybody. Love you, and see you even further beyond the veil.
Love you guys.